There is a silent dread that lurks in the human heart, the sense that one's very body is a prison, that every organ, every cell, every strand of DNA is a fixed script written before birth, and that no effort of will can alter what has been decreed. Many live under the oppressive shadow of heredity, recalling the illnesses that struck their parents, the disorders that claimed their grandparents, the whispered warnings in family gatherings. It runs in the blood. Others feel chained to patterns of poverty, failure, or addiction that seem to repeat across generations, as though destiny itself were encoded into the body's blueprint. The modern mind, schooled in genetics, often bows before this invisible tyrant, believing that DNA is an iron law, unyielding and merciless. And so multitudes live in quiet resignation, assuming that the sickness they fear, the weakness they dread, or the futility they endure is inevitable. Yet Joseph Murphy calls us to question this fear. What if the code written in your being is not the final word? What if the so-called prison of DNA is not a cage, but a canvas, a responsive medium shaped by the brushstrokes of your thoughts, emotions, and faith? What if what we call heredity is merely the echo of subconscious belief, impressed again and again until it takes on the form of flesh and blood? To ask these questions is to awaken a spark of hope, for it suggests that the power which binds can also be loosed, and that the chains of genetics are but illusions to a mind that knows its divine origin. The scriptures whisper a deeper truth. Psalm 139 declares, "I am fearfully and wonderfully made." This is not a statement of biology, but of theology, a reminder that the blueprint of your being was written not in the fragile ink of human genes, but in the eternal Word of God. The psalmist does not say, "My DNA defines me," but rather, "All my members were written in thy book." Murphy interprets this as the subconscious mind's perfect pattern, the divine book of life implanted within each soul. What men call DNA is but the outer garment. The true garment of destiny is woven by thought, belief, and faith. Let us pause and reflect. Fear is always the first enemy of healing. The terror of hereditary disease, the despair of being trapped in a body one cannot change, creates the very mental image that the subconscious accepts and executes. Just as fertile soil does not question whether the seed is wheat or thorn, but simply brings forth after its kind, so too the subconscious accepts the impressions of fear, rehearsed night and day, until the body obeys and manifests the dreaded condition. This is the cruel irony of heredity, not that it is unbreakable, but that belief in its inevitability programs the subconscious to reproduce its image. And so the invitation arises: dare to whisper a new command. Dare to speak to the silent intelligence that courses through your cells to affirm that your life is not chained to the past but guided by the infinite present. Dare to look at your body not as a curse but as a servant, awaiting instruction. In the drowsy moments before sleep, when the conscious guard lowers its weapons, whisper, "I am not bound by the past. The life of God flows in me now." My body hears and obeys the word of harmony. To speak thus is not wishful thinking. It is aligning with spiritual law. Murphy reminds us, your subconscious mind takes the orders you give it based upon belief and suggestions accepted as true. If fear of heredity is an order, then healing words can be orders too. And just as weeds sown yesterday can be uprooted by planting roses today, so destructive mental images can be displaced by visions of wholeness. The question we face at the dawn of this journey is this: will you continue to live as a prisoner of fear, or will you claim your role as co-author of your destiny? For the truth remains unshaken: you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and the prison you dread is but a shadow cast by unbelief. Speak life, and the shadow dissolves. Whisper truth, and the cells awaken. This is the first step in rewriting the future. For centuries, humanity has wrestled with the crushing weight of determinism, the sense that we are victims of forces beyond our control, that destiny is etched into the marrow of our bones, locked in double helices that spiral like unyielding staircases into an inescapable future. It is a sobering thought that the failures of fathers, the illnesses of mothers, the tragedies of ancestors echo endlessly through the corridors of time, leaving us powerless to redirect the course of our lives. Philosophers have long debated whether man is free or bound, whether the human spirit is sovereign or enslaved to mechanical laws of nature. But Joseph Murphy steps into this debate with a luminous declaration. You are not a victim of blind biology. You are the custodian of an infinite subconscious power that outshines every so-called genetic decree. The subconscious, he teaches, is not a passive recorder of heredity, but the very architect of experience, shaping the visible body and the unfolding future according to the impressions impressed upon it. This perspective dismantles the myth of biological destiny. For what is DNA if not a symbolic script, a physical metaphor of an even deeper code? Science describes a sequence of nucleotides, but Murphy penetrates to the metaphysical sequence of thoughts, beliefs, and images which sculpt the substance of life itself. Imagine DNA not as a prison sentence, but as parchment, a scroll, upon which the subconscious inscribes the patterns it accepts. If the subconscious is saturated with fear, guilt, and sickness, then it writes into the body weakness and disorder. If it is saturated with love, faith, and harmony, then it inscribes radiant health, peace, and vitality. Thus, the critical question is not, what have I inherited, but rather, what am I impressing? Think of your subconscious as the master gardener, and your DNA as the soil it tends. Soil does not resist. It does not argue with the seed. If you plant thorns, you reap thorns. If you plant roses, you reap roses. So too your body is obedient, and it brings forth whatever seeds of thought you sow. Modern science already hints at this truth with discoveries of epigenetics, the idea that genes are switched on or off by environment and mindset. But Murphy takes it further, declaring that thought itself, charged with faith, is the true environment of your cells. The spiritual law transcends biology. What you impress inwardly must be expressed outwardly. Now consider the implications. The so-called curse of heredity loses its grip, for the real power lies not in the strands of DNA, but in the images and beliefs woven into the subconscious. If generations have believed in poverty, sickness, or limitation, then those beliefs are unconsciously handed down like ghostly inheritances, shaping each new mind with the same blueprint of despair. But the moment one awakens to the truth, the moment one recognizes the sovereignty of thought, the chain is broken. In the instant you declare, I am not my past, I am not my ancestry, I am not bound by genetic decree, you write a new script upon the canvas of your being. This is not denial of science, it is elevation of science to its spiritual root, a recognition that biology itself bows before belief. Therefore, the myth of biological destiny must be replaced with a theology of spiritual authorship. Man is not a helpless bystander watching genes dictate his fate. He is the very co-author of life with God, inscribing upon the inner tablet of the subconscious the conditions he desires to see expressed. Every whispered affirmation, every vivid visualization, every conviction of faith is a line of new code, a strand of spiritual genetics woven into the fabric of being. And because the subconscious never argues, it accepts these impressions and commands the body to obey. Thus, the believer who nightly whispers, I am radiant with health, my cells are aligned with divine order, my body reflects the harmony of God, is not engaging in fantasy, but in the most practical science of the spirit, the rewriting of the code of destiny itself. In this light, the phrase, talk to your DNA, takes on its true meaning. It is not mere poetry, it is instruction. Speak to the innermost intelligence that governs your life. Whisper into the subconscious the words of truth, and the genetic orchestra will adjust its tune. As surely as music changes when the conductor raises his hand, so too does the body change when the mind raises its belief. The message is both liberating and sobering. You are not sentenced by heredity, but you are always writing your future by the thoughts you hold most dearly. In this truth lies immense responsibility, and yet, even more, immense hope. Joseph Murphy often described the subconscious mind as soil, ever ready to receive whatever seed is planted within it. And in this analogy, he revealed one of the most radical truths of spiritual psychology, that DNA itself, the intricate code of biological life, is not a tyrant but a servant, not a fixed decree but a living seed that can express endlessly according to the pattern impressed upon it. Just as soil has no opinion of whether the farmer sows roses or thistles, so your subconscious has no judgment about whether you impress fear, faith, sickness, or health. It merely accepts, incubates, and brings forth the harvest. In this sense, DNA is not the master key to life, but the responsive material shaped by the convictions of mind. And here Murphy strikes with urgency. The world you see, the health you experience, the conditions you endure, are not accidents of genetics, but expressions of subconscious beliefs planted, often unknowingly, over years and even generations. Think for a moment of a farmer who sows weeds in his field and later complains that he cannot reap wheat. He may insist that the soil is against him, that fate is cruel, that the earth has predetermined his failure. But the truth is simpler. The soil brought forth exactly what was sown. In the same way, when humanity blames heredity or family history, it is like the farmer cursing the soil for bringing forth the seeds he himself has sown, or the seeds his ancestors impressed upon the subconscious and passed along as habitual thought forms. Murphy insists that the law of the subconscious is impersonal, impartial, and inexorable. It works for good or ill, depending on what you plant within it. If you whisper night after night that you are weak, cursed, or bound, your body obeys and your future mirrors that impression. But if you declare with faith that the divine pattern of perfection rules your life, that health and abundance are your rightful inheritance, the subconscious likewise obeys, and DNA expresses that higher pattern. Here lies the majesty of the teaching. The subconscious mind is the blueprint room of destiny, and your conscious thoughts are the architects sending instructions to the builders. DNA, then, is the obedient craftsman, following orders without question. If the orders are corrupted with fear, resentment, and despair, the structure collapses. But if the orders are filled with harmony, love, and divine faith, the structure stands radiant and strong. Murphy reminds us that once the subconscious accepts an idea, it immediately sets about executing it with mathematical precision. This is why he insisted that suggestion in the drowsy state, just before sleep, carries such miraculous power. The conscious guard is lowered, and the subconscious soil is open, fertile, ready to receive the seed. At that sacred threshold, every whisper becomes command, every thought becomes decree, and every image becomes blueprint. Imagine your subconscious as a scribe copying letters onto a scroll, and imagine DNA as the parchment upon which those letters are written. The scribe does not pause to question the content. He simply inscribes whatever message he is given. If you hand him a page filled with despair, he copies despair. If you hand him a page radiant with joy and faith, he copies joy and faith. The parchment of DNA, then, is not the originator but the receiver. This is why Murphy insists that we must vigilantly guard the inner language we speak, for every repeated phrase, every emotional declaration, is a message handed to the scribe who copies it into the very fibers of our being. And because the subconscious never rests, it writes day and night, executing every order it has been given until a new order is supplied.
Consider how this reframes the entire conversation of health, destiny, and life. The world tells you that you are bound by heredity, that genes dictate disease, that the best you can do is manage decline.
But Murphy declares that belief itself is the greater law, that faith impresses higher orders upon the subconscious, and that what you believe with feeling is infinitely more powerful than what you fear in your genes. To speak to your DNA is to speak to your subconscious, to send new orders into the soil of life, and to expect that the harvest will follow. The awe of this truth is almost overwhelming. You are not a prisoner of the script you inherited. You are the author of the script being written now, line by line, word by word, affirmation by affirmation. In this realization is empowerment beyond measure, for it means that every whispered command of faith is a stroke of pen rewriting the story of your life. When Joseph Murphy confronted the concept of heredity, he was not denying the observable patterns in families, the similarities in appearance, the recurrence of certain weaknesses or strengths across bloodlines. Instead, he peeled back the curtain to reveal the deeper mechanism at play, that the subconscious mind, endlessly impressionable, absorbs not only the words and attitudes of parents, but the very atmosphere of their belief, and from that atmosphere, it constructs its internal blueprint. Thus, what we call generational curse is less a rigid genetic inevitability than a spiritual hypnosis passed from one mind to another. Each child unwittingly accepting the fearful impressions of the parents as unquestionable truths. A family convinced of poverty transmits that conviction more powerfully than any financial condition could. A household filled with dread of illness plants those seeds in tender minds until the body itself manifests the expected ailments. The myth of unbreakable destiny lies not in chromosomes, but in unquestioned thought patterns, repeated and reinforced until they feel as binding as chains of iron. Murphy likens this to corrupted code in the spiritual software of man. Imagine your subconscious mind as a vast computer, capable of running infinite programs of health, abundance, and joy, but weighed down by inherited scripts riddled with errors. A father filled with bitterness speaks words of limitation. A mother overcome with anxiety whispers fears of disease. A child hears, absorbs, and downloads these corrupted programs until the system malfunctions and the body responds with disorder. This is the rust that eats away at the code of life. Not because DNA is inherently flawed, but because the subconscious has been fed destructive instructions that it faithfully reproduces. The rusted program runs in the background, unseen yet all-pervasive, repeating its cycles until someone awakens and chooses to intervene, to restore the original design hidden beneath the corrosion. And herein lies the glory of spiritual teaching. Beneath every distortion, beneath every inherited program of lack or sickness, there remains the original divine code, the blueprint of health, harmony, and abundance, written by infinite intelligence itself. Murphy assures us that this perfect pattern can never be destroyed. It may be obscured, it may be forgotten, it may be covered over with layers of fear and guilt, but like the sun behind storm clouds, it remains unchained, waiting to shine again. This is why he insists that transformation is possible in any life, at any stage, regardless of history or heredity. For the subconscious mind holds within it not only the record of corrupted images, but also the eternal memory of divine order. And when that order is re-impressed with faith and love, the corrupted code dissolves and the system resets to wholeness. It is crucial here to see the role of awareness. So many accept generational patterns blindly, repeating them as though powerless. My father died young of heart disease, one says, so I must be next. No one in our family has ever been wealthy, another laments, so I will never escape poverty. These declarations are not statements of fate, but affirmations of faith in bondage. Each repetition plants the seed deeper into the subconscious, where it takes root and bears fruit in lived experience. The tragedy is not that DNA commands destiny, but that belief in DNA's tyranny becomes the command impressed upon the inner mind. Murphy calls us to reverse this process, to recognize the corrupted program for what it is, to reject it with conscious authority, and to affirm with conviction that the divine code is still present, still operative, still waiting to be spoken into expression. Picture now a rusted gate at the entrance of a garden. For years it has been unused, neglected, its hinges frozen with decay. Families walk past it, shaking their heads, saying, "This garden is closed forever." Yet one day a seeker takes oil and cloth, patiently scrubs away the rust, and the gate creaks open to reveal the fertile paradise within. So it is with the subconscious. Beneath the rust of inherited fear and false belief lies the gate to divine abundance, still intact, still waiting for the oil of faith and the cloth of affirmation. The work is not to build a new pattern from nothing, but to restore the original design implanted by the Creator. When you whisper truth to your subconscious, when you insist that divine order governs your life, you are in fact oiling the hinges of the gate. dissolving the corrosion of generational curse, and stepping once more into the garden of wholeness. And so Murphy challenges the listener. Will you continue to repeat the inherited chant of defeat? Or will you be the one to break the cycle, the one who declares, I am not bound by the past, I am not cursed by heredity, I am free in the pattern of God? For as soon as you speak this, not timidly, but with conviction, the subconscious hears and obeys. The rust falls away, the corrupted code begins to dissolve, and the divine pattern, flawless, radiant, eternal, begins to reassert itself in your DNA, your body, your circumstances. Generational curses end the moment one person awakens, and by awakening you do not only liberate yourself, but you plant new seeds for those who follow after you. Thus your whispered words before sleep may not only heal your body, but rewrite the story of your family line, converting a legacy of fear into a legacy of faith, a chain of despair into a chain of blessings. If the first layer of inherited patterns is the generational curse that seeps silently into the subconscious from family and environment, the second layer is the quiet sabotage that each individual inflicts upon themselves, the daily repetitions of fear, guilt, resentment, and inferiority that become as mutations in the inner code, distortions of the divine pattern that was meant to govern every cell in harmony. Joseph Murphy warned repeatedly that these four poisons are the great disruptors of the subconscious mind, that they gnaw at the foundations of health and prosperity more insidiously than any outward condition could. Fear anticipates disaster and programs the subconscious to oblige. Guilt replays old failures and convinces the body it must punish itself. Resentment burns like acid through the inner life and manifests as tension, disease, or failure. And inferiority whispers that one is unworthy of blessing, and so the subconscious withholds the very good it is ready to deliver. These are not small emotions. They are the silent engineers of ruin, bending the once perfect script of divine order into tangled hieroglyphs of misery. Imagine for a moment that the subconscious is a grand library, and within it lies the pristine book of life, written in golden ink, flawless in its design. This book contains the true genetic script of man: health, joy, love, abundance, creativity. Yet in this library also roam vandals, scribbling in the margins, blotting out lines, distorting sentences until the pages appear chaotic. Fear scrawls its frantic warnings across the margins. You are sick. You will fail. Danger is near. Guilt writes its accusations. You are unworthy. You must suffer. You cannot be forgiven. Resentment underlines offenses and adds footnotes of bitterness. Remember what was done to you. Hold on to the wound. Never release it. Inferiority stains entire chapters with the ink of self-condemnation. You are small. You are nothing. You cannot rise. The tragedy is that the subconscious, faithful servant that it is, reads these marginal notes as if they are the true text and sets about executing them in the body and the life of the individual. And so the pure pattern becomes hidden, not destroyed, but obscured, waiting for the day when the librarian, the conscious mind, chooses to cleanse the book and restore its original brilliance. Murphy emphasized that disease and misfortune often have no cause in the physical realm, but are the outer reflections of these inner poisons. He would point to hypnosis experiments where a subject, convinced by suggestion that ice was fire, would blister as if burned. He would remind his listeners that under hypnosis, the subconscious obeys the faintest impression without argument, producing physical results from mental causes. Fear is nothing more than self-hypnosis. Guilt is nothing more than a suggestion repeated until believed. Resentment is nothing more than a hypnotic fixation on the past. The subconscious, unable to reason, takes these poisons as commands, inscribes them into the DNA, and the body responds accordingly. A lifetime of fear may express as chronic illness. A lifetime of guilt may harden into the afflictions of the heart. A lifetime of resentment may corrode relationships and finances alike. And yet, Murphy assures, because these conditions are written by thought, they can be unwritten by thought. Because the poisons are mental, The antidotes are mental as well. Consider the way guilt operates. A man commits an error, real or imagined, and instead of releasing it, he rehearses it in the theater of his mind, punishing himself anew each day. The subconscious, observing this ritual, concludes, "My master desires punishment," and obligingly produces illness, failure, or repeated loss. Or take resentment. A woman clings to the memory of betrayal, rehearsing the scene night after night. The subconscious, impartial, accepts the bitterness as truth and inscribes it into the cells, producing tension, ulcers, or relational discord. It is not the original event that curses the individual, but the constant rehearsal of it in the subconscious. Here lies the terrifying power of the poisons. They do not need to be true to be effective. They only need to be believed. And yet, Murphy offers not despair, but deliverance. He points to the law of substitution. Just as darkness cannot endure once light is introduced, so too fear cannot survive once faith is enthroned. Guilt dissolves when forgiveness is embraced. Resentment evaporates when love is declared. Inferiority disappears when the truth of divine sonship is affirmed. These poisons are not permanent mutations, but temporary distortions, correctable the moment one chooses to impress the subconscious with their antidotes. A whispered affirmation before sleep, repeated with feeling, can undo years of inner sabotage. I am at peace. God's love fills me. I forgive all and release all. I am worthy of divine abundance. I am strong in the infinite. Spoken with conviction, such words overwrite the corrupted code, restore the margins of the book, and reveal once more the golden script of health and harmony. So the listener is urged, examine the whispers of your own heart. What poisons have you been feeding your subconscious? What hidden suggestions have you allowed to take root? Tonight, instead of replaying old fears and guilts, speak the antidote. Whisper faith instead of fear, forgiveness instead of resentment, worthiness instead of inferiority, love instead of hate. The subconscious will hear, will accept, will inscribe the new pattern into the DNA, and the body in the future will obey. Thus, inner sabotage is undone not by effort but by substitution, not by struggle but by surrender to truth. And in this lies your freedom. You are not the victim of the poisons. You are the master who can choose the antidote. You are the author who can erase the vandal scribbles and restore the book of life to its eternal perfection. There comes a turning point in the great drama of the soul when one begins to realize that beneath all the errors of thought, beneath the poisons of fear, guilt, resentment, and inferiority, there still exists an indestructible pattern, a luminous architecture of life that no false belief can erase. Joseph Murphy called this the divine blueprint, the perfect image of health, harmony, abundance, and joy, imprinted upon the subconscious by infinite intelligence from the beginning. Just as a sculptor may chip away at marble and reveal a distorted form, yet beneath the surface there remains the essence of the original block, so too does every human soul carry within itself the undamaged plan of God. Sickness, misfortune, failure, these are but temporary disfigurations, shadows cast upon the canvas, not the canvas itself. The true pattern remains untouched, waiting to be rediscovered and impressed anew upon the subconscious mind. Murphy insisted that this recognition alone can begin the healing process, for the moment one ceases to see disease or poverty as ultimate reality and begins instead to affirm the eternal presence of the divine design, the subconscious stirs to life, the body in the future then directed not by the false image of disorder but by the reawakened memory of harmony. Consider the seed of an oak tree. If the sprout is bent or twisted by wind, it may grow at an angle. Yet the inner genetic program always strives toward the fullness of the oak. So it is with the human spirit, even when bent by the storms of false belief. The hidden code of God urges toward wholeness. The task is not to create perfection, but to allow it, to remove the distortions that conceal it, and to align thought with the original intention of the Creator. Theological tradition calls this the Logos, the word by which all things were made. John's Gospel declares, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made." To Murphy, This word is not merely an ancient utterance, but the living pattern that sustains creation, the very code of spiritual genetics that dwells within each soul. When you align your subconscious with this word through affirmation, visualization, and faith, you restore the original pattern to your life. Every cell in your body carries the memory of divine order, and when spoken to with faith, it responds, reconfiguring itself in accordance with the eternal plan. Let us picture this blueprint as a radiant golden double helix, not of molecules and atoms, but of divine light, spiraling within the depths of your being. Each strand carries messages of vitality, abundance, joy, and peace. When you are aligned with truth, these strands glow with harmony, broadcasting signals of health to every cell, harmony to every circumstance, success to every endeavor. When you stray into fear and resentment, the light dims, but it is never extinguished. It waits for the word of faith to re-illuminate. And so Murphy calls us to visualize, to affirm, to declare that this golden spiral is active within us now. In doing so, we overwrite the shadows of corrupted belief and awaken the original script. Philosophically, this recognition resolves the dilemma of determinism versus freedom. You are not bound by biology, nor are you a ghost adrift in chaos. You are anchored in a divine design, and your freedom lies in choosing whether to affirm the corrupted copy or the eternal original. When you say, I am sick, you align with the distortion. When you say, I am whole, you align with the blueprint. When you say, I am doomed to poverty, you activate the corrupted program. When you affirm, I prosper by divine right, you reawaken the pattern of abundance. The subconscious does not argue. It simply obeys the command it is given. Thus, every affirmation is a key turned in the lock, either opening the door to disorder or to harmony. It is for this reason Murphy urged his readers to speak the truth, even when appearances screamed otherwise. A man with a painful body must whisper before sleep, every cell of me is now aligned with the divine pattern of health. A woman in financial struggle must affirm, the infinite riches of God flow to me freely and abundantly. The appearance is temporary, the blueprint is eternal. With repetition, with faith, with emotional conviction, the subconscious accepts the higher command, and the divine code is reasserted in the fabric of life. And so the invitation is clear. No matter what shadow you face, no matter how corrupted the pattern seems, know that the true design is still within you. You are not asked to invent it. You are asked to remember it. Whisper to your subconscious, the blueprint of God is my reality. The perfect code governs my life. I restore now the pattern of wholeness, and it manifests in every cell and every circumstance. With such declarations, softly spoken in the silence before sleep, you begin to dissolve the false images and awaken the luminous design that has always been yours. To understand the enormity of this truth, one must grasp that the body itself is not some dumb machine separate from the life of the mind, but rather the living manuscript upon which the subconscious inscribes its convictions. Joseph Murphy would often remind his listeners that the subconscious mind is the builder of the body, that every heartbeat, every breath, every silent orchestration of cells is guided not by conscious effort, but by the deeper intelligence within. It is this hidden director that heals a wound without your command, digests food while you sleep, and keeps the stars of your inner universe in motion without fatigue or failure. And because it is the subconscious that governs these functions, it is also the subconscious that hears and obeys the words you impress upon it. To speak to your cells is not metaphorical alone. It is literal in the deepest sense. For the subconscious is the medium of communication between your thought and your DNA, between your belief and your biology. Murphy taught that whispered words before sleep have a peculiar power, for at that twilight of consciousness the vigilant guard of the reasoning mind is lowered, and the subconscious, receptive and childlike, accepts suggestion without debate. This is the golden gate through which one may step each night into communion with the inner builder. In those drowsy moments, if you whisper, every cell in my body hears the word of life, The subconscious takes the message as fact and transmits it to the body's innermost processes. Just as a conductor raises his baton and the orchestra adjusts its tone, so your subconscious raises the command of the cellular orchestra and the music of health begins to play. Picture this: a vast assembly of cells, trillions of tiny workers, each awaiting instruction. For years they may have been marching to the drumbeat of fear, repeating the rhythm of disease impressed upon them by ancestral beliefs or by your own anxious thoughts. Yet when a new command is whispered with faith, the drumbeat changes. Instead of discord, harmony begins. Instead of breakdown, renewal flows. The cells are not rebels, they are faithful servants. They obey whatever command is given, and the whispered word becomes their new law. The task is not to struggle, not to shout, not to plead, but to quietly, consistently, lovingly direct them with words of life. Murphy warned that people often sabotage themselves by affirming sickness while desiring health, by rehearsing fear while praying for courage. The subconscious cannot reconcile contradictions. It simply executes the most frequent and most emotionally charged impressions. Thus, a man who repeats all day, "I am afraid of cancer, it runs in my family," but whispers at night, "I am whole and healthy," will find the first suggestion outweighing the second, for fear has greater intensity. The remedy is persistence in the truth, whispering it not once but nightly, saturating the subconscious until the fear is replaced with faith. With each repetition, the old command fades and the new one takes root, and soon the subconscious no longer doubts but accepts, and once accepted, it begins execution immediately. In this practice, there is no room for half-heartedness. The whisper must not be mechanical, but alive with feeling. When you say, "Every cell of my body responds to divine order," you must feel the warmth of that order. Imagine the cells glowing with vitality. See in your mind's eye the body radiating light. This marriage of word and image, of affirmation and visualization, engraves the message deep into the subconscious and imprints it upon the body's code. It is a sacred dialogue between spirit and flesh, the law of cause and effect operating in silence. Therefore, the nightly ritual becomes the crucible of transformation. In the quiet of your room, as you lay down to rest, you close your eyes and let the conscious chatter dissolve. You whisper not to the air, but to the infinite within. Every nerve, tissue, and organ in me is aligned with divine harmony. My body hears the word and is made whole. You feel the truth of it, you visualize it, and then you surrender to sleep, confident that the subconscious has received its instruction and will carry it out while you rest. No effort is required, no strain is needed, for the law is sure. What is impressed must be expressed. In this way, speaking to yourselves is not a mystical fancy, but a practical method of aligning with spiritual law. It is the reclaiming of authority over your inner kingdom, the recognition that you are captain of the ship and that your subconscious crew will obey the orders you give. The body is not your enemy, nor is DNA your master. They are your servants awaiting your command. And the command that heals is always the command rooted in faith, whispered with love, affirmed with certainty, and sealed with the quiet confidence that infinite intelligence works through you. There is a sacred art in combining imagery with affirmation. For the subconscious does not merely listen to words, it sees and feels the pictures they carry, and when word and image unite with emotion, the message becomes irresistible. Joseph Murphy again and again reminded his readers that faith is imagination kindled with feeling, and that whatever you vividly imagine with conviction is accepted by the subconscious as reality. Thus, when one whispers healing affirmations before sleep, one must also paint with the brush of imagination, seeing in the mind's eye the radiant outcome, living already in the scene desired. The whispered phrase becomes the seed, and the image becomes the soil in which it is planted, moist and fertile with emotion. To whisper, "I am whole," without seeing wholeness or feeling the joy of health is to scatter seeds on hard ground. But to whisper the same words while visualizing golden light bathing every cell, while feeling peace and gratitude as though it were already accomplished, is to bury the seed deep where it will take root and grow. Consider how a child drifts into sleep after a bedtime story. The tale plays on the screen of the imagination long after the conscious mind has surrendered, and the child dreams in the imagery of the narrative. So too does the subconscious dream in the imagery of your affirmations. If you whisper, "My DNA is now aligned with divine order," and then see in your inner vision a glowing spiral of light pulsing with perfect rhythm, your subconscious receives the command not as fantasy but as blueprint. It sets to work throughout the night, adjusting the silent operations of the body to conform to the image impressed. The cells, obedient scribes, begin to copy the new script, and though results may not appear instantly, the process is already underway. Just as a seed germinates unseen beneath the soil before breaking into visible form, Murphy emphasized that faith is not begging or hoping, but assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is why the drowsy state before sleep is so powerful. The conscious guard that questions, doubts, and argues is subdued, and the subconscious accepts impressions with childlike receptivity. In that holy interval, when you are neither fully awake nor fully asleep, your whisper is as a king's decree, and your visualization is as law. The subconscious does not dispute it, does not delay, it simply sets about expressing the command. Hence, one must approach this practice not with strain or desperation, but with calm assurance, like a gardener planting seeds and knowing by natural law that they will grow. Let us picture together a nightly ritual. You recline in silence, the body relaxed, the breath deep and even. You whisper slowly, rhythmically, "The life of God flows through every strand of my being. My DNA vibrates with divine harmony." As you whisper, you imagine a radiant current of golden light descending from above, flowing into the crown of your head, coursing gently through every organ, every cell, every strand of DNA. You see the double helix shimmering, glowing, recoated with perfection. You feel the warmth of health in your skin, the ease of strength in your muscles, the peace of harmony in your heart. You whisper again, "I am whole, I am renewed, I am restored." And the image grows brighter, the feeling deeper, until you sense as though the transformation were already complete. You allow this union of word, image, and emotion to carry you into sleep, and in that sleep the subconscious continues the work, knitting together the pattern of health from the threads of your faith. The marvel of this practice is that it requires no physical effort, no straining or grasping. You do not need to know how the subconscious will accomplish the healing, any more than a farmer needs to know how the seed cracks and sprouts beneath the soil. Your part is to sow with consistency and faith. The subconscious takes care of the mechanics. Over time, as you persist, you will begin to notice subtle shifts, a deeper peace in your emotions, a release of old fears, a lightness in the body, perhaps even the dissolving of pains or ailments long endured. These are the fruits of a new code being written within, the evidence that your subconscious has accepted the blueprint and is expressing it through the obedient medium of DNA. Thus, imagery fused with affirmation is the master key of transformation. Words alone may falter, images alone may fade, feelings alone may wander, but when the three are woven together, they form a cord unbreakable, binding the subconscious to the truth you declare. And the subconscious, once convinced, cannot resist. It must express the pattern impressed upon it. This is the eternal law. As a man imagines and feels, so is he. Therefore, let your whispers be alive with vision. Let your visions be saturated with feeling, and let your feelings be crowned with faith. And you will find that every night becomes a workshop of destiny, every dream a rehearsal of wholeness, every cell a participant in the great recreation of your life. To truly appreciate the depth of this teaching, one must come to see that the body itself is not some isolated entity working independently of the mind, but rather the physical servant of the inner life, the clay shaped continuously by the potter of the subconscious. Joseph Murphy was unwavering in his assertion that the subconscious mind is the inner physician, the divine architect that builds and maintains every organ, every tissue, every cell.
Long before medical science had traced the silent operations of the autonomic nervous system, Murphy was already proclaiming that your body is governed by a wisdom deeper than conscious intellect,
a wisdom that listens unceasingly to the impressions you make upon it. It is this hidden physician that closes a wound, that knits together a fractured bone, that regulates the beating of the heart and the flow of blood without your conscious effort. And because this physician is guided by the beliefs and images impressed upon the subconscious, it will follow whatever blueprint you provide, whether that blueprint is one of sickness or health, decay or renewal, limitation or liberation. Murphy would often say that the subconscious is both surgeon and nurse, both builder and repairman, capable of orchestrating healing far beyond the reach of conscious willpower. He pointed to countless testimonies of men and women who, by simply impressing the idea of health before sleep, awoke to find pain dissolved, disease arrested, vitality restored. To him, these were not miracles in the sense of divine exceptions, but demonstrations of divine law, the subconscious responding faithfully to the command it had received. The body is obedient, never rebellious, and whatever is impressed deeply upon the subconscious becomes the order it carries out. Thus, to whisper nightly, "Every cell, nerve, and tissue of my body is being restored to divine perfection," is to issue a decree to the inner physician, a prescription written not on paper, but on the tablet of the soul, and the body, loyal servant, hastens to fulfill it. Visualize for a moment your subconscious as a vast hospital, stocked with every instrument, every medicine, every skill required for healing, yet waiting silently for instruction. If the conscious mind continually delivers messages of fear, "I am weak, I am ill, I am doomed," then the subconscious, impartial and obedient, prescribes weakness, illness, and despair. But if the conscious mind, filled with faith, whispers instead, "I am whole, I am strong, I am renewed by the life of God within me," then the subconscious sets the hospital into motion, sending forth healing streams, mobilizing immune responses, recalibrating functions, restoring order. The pharmacy is always stocked, the surgeon always ready, the nurse always attentive. The only question is whether the instructions given are those of fear or of faith. This is why Murphy stressed the importance of consistency and feeling in prayer affirmation. The subconscious is not swayed by half-hearted statements muttered without conviction. It is moved by impressions soaked in emotion, images saturated with belief. The one who affirms, "I am healed," while inwardly doubting and fearing, cancels out the suggestion with contradiction. But the one who whispers, "The infinite healing presence flows through me now," and feels even a small measure of peace, gratitude, and trust, begins to impress the subconscious with truth. Once the impression is accepted, the subconscious begins its silent work, sometimes gradually, sometimes dramatically, but always faithfully. And so, we must see our bodies not as prisons of heredity, not as ticking mechanisms destined to fail, but as sacred temples maintained by an intelligence infinitely wise and infinitely responsive. You are not at war with your flesh. Your flesh is your ally, your servant, your outward mirror of inward conviction. DNA itself is not your enemy. It is but the manuscript upon which the subconscious writes. If you instruct the inner physician with commands of health, if you whisper words of life before sleep, if you paint images of vitality in the gallery of your mind, then your body will obey, for it knows no other law but the law of belief. Therefore, the great work of healing is not to fight the body, but to speak to it, to encourage it, to remind it of its divine pattern. Tonight, before you close your eyes, speak gently within. Every organ of my body is governed by the divine intelligence of my subconscious mind. The inner physician is at work, restoring, renewing, revitalizing. I give thanks for perfect health now. Rest in this assurance, and know that as you sleep, the subconscious builder is carrying out its work with exact precision. In this realization, you discover the secret Murphy proclaimed. The subconscious mind is your greatest physician, and your body is its faithful patient, responding always to the word of truth you plant in its care. When Joseph Murphy spoke of the power of belief, he was not offering pious platitudes, but unveiling a universal law, as precise and impartial as the law of gravity. He called it the law of belief, and he insisted that this law governs every cell of the body, every organ, every strand of DNA, every circumstance of life. According to your belief, be it done unto you, is not a fragment of scripture reserved for a bygone era, but a psychological and spiritual truth operating now, moment by moment. The subconscious does not weigh arguments. It does not reason with syllogisms. It does not ask whether the belief is noble or ignoble, wise or foolish. It simply accepts the impressions delivered with conviction and sets about embodying them in the flesh and in the field of circumstance. Thus, if one holds firmly to the belief that sickness is inevitable because it runs in the family, the subconscious engraves that decree into the very tissues of the body. If, however, one nurtures the belief that divine health is one's true inheritance, that the body is already coded with the pattern of wholeness, then the subconscious executes that decree with equal precision, and healing begins to unfold. It is here that Murphy's teaching collides head-on with the despair of modern determinism. Biologists tell us that we are prisoners of genes, that hereditary patterns dictate the boundaries of possibility. Yet Murphy cries out from a higher altitude. Thought transcends gene. Belief outweighs biology. The image impressed upon the subconscious is more powerful than any code of flesh. What you believe with feeling becomes your reality, not because of blind superstition, but because the subconscious faithfully shapes the body and the environment to conform to its accepted blueprint. The placebo effect, which science reluctantly acknowledges, is nothing less than the law of belief at work. The patient, convinced that healing medicine has been given, experiences actual recovery, even when the pill is inert. Faith heals not because the outer ritual possesses magic, but because the subconscious accepts the suggestion and the body obeys. This is the same law whether the object of faith is a sugar pill, a sacred relic, or a whispered affirmation before sleep. The outer symbol is but the delivery system. The true medicine is belief itself. Yet Murphy warned that half-beliefs and contradictions are fatal to results. The subconscious does not respond to words alone, but to the feeling behind the words. To whisper, "I am healthy," while trembling with fear of disease, is to impress the fear more deeply than the affirmation. The subconscious hears the louder voice, and the louder voice is always the voice of emotion. Thus, when you pray, when you affirm, when you speak to your DNA, you must do so not mechanically, but with feeling, with imagination, with an inward sense that what you declare is already true. Faith is not begging for what might be. It is assuming the feeling that it is already so. This is why Murphy emphasized the sleep technique. For in the drowsy state, the conscious guard that resists and doubts is quieted, and the subconscious is more easily impressed with conviction. Imagine a king dictating laws to his scribes. If he speaks firmly, with authority, the decree is written and enforced across the land. But if he mutters uncertainly, contradicting himself, the scribes are confused, the decree is muddled, and the land descends into chaos. So it is with the subconscious. If you affirm health one moment and rehearse fear the next, your subconscious is left to obey the stronger of the two, and the stronger is always the one most deeply charged with emotion. Therefore, your work is to align your heart with your words, to let your whisper before sleep be more than empty syllables, to let it be alive with conviction, clothed in gratitude, saturated with expectancy. When belief and feeling unite, the results are inevitable. A woman plagued with chronic pain who nightly whispers, "Every cell of my body vibrates with divine order. The healing presence flows through me now," while vividly picturing herself moving freely and joyfully, will in time experience her body conforming to that image. A man haunted by poverty who affirms with conviction, "I am prospered in all my ways. Divine supply flows freely to me now," while feeling the joy of abundance and picturing himself giving generously, will see circumstances rearranged to reflect that belief. For the law of belief is universal. It does not ask what you desire. It only asks what you truly accept as real. And so the invitation is given. Examine your beliefs. What do you accept as inevitable? What hidden convictions have you allowed to dictate the story of your life? If they are beliefs of bondage, whisper tonight a new decree. Say with feeling, I am whole, I am free, I am the child of infinite intelligence, and my body and my future are governed by divine order now. Speak it until you feel it until you believe it until the subconscious accepts it without question. For once accepted, the law of belief goes to work, rewriting your inner code, reshaping your DNA, restructuring your destiny. It is not a matter of if, but only of when. For what is impressed must be expressed, and what is believed must by law become flesh. In order to anchor this truth more vividly, Joseph Murphy often turned to testimony, for nothing persuades the heart so strongly as the evidence of a life transformed by principle. One such example he recounted was that of a young singer, trembling with fear at the very thought of performing, her throat tightening, her breath faltering, her voice betraying her. On the surface, her problem appeared to be one of nerves, of personality, of lack of training, yet Murphy saw deeper. He understood that her affliction was the fruit of a subconscious image of failure, a mental rehearsal of disaster that played over and over until the body itself responded in obedience, strangling her voice each time she faced an audience. The conscious mind told her, I want to sing. But the subconscious, programmed by repeated impressions of fear, whispered louder, You cannot sing. You will fail. You will be humiliated. And so the body obeyed the subconscious blueprint, not the conscious desire. Murphy prescribed not medication or elaborate technique, but the simplest of remedies, whispered affirmations in the drowsy state before sleep. He instructed her to relax completely in her chair 3 times a day, especially at night before drifting off, and to murmur slowly, gently, with feeling, I sing beautifully. I am poised, serene, confident, and calm. She was not to strain or force these words, but to let them flow like a lullaby, allowing them to sink quietly into the subconscious. At first, her conscious mind protested. But I am not poised. I am not confident. I tremble with fear. Yet Murphy knew that the subconscious does not argue. It does not reason. It does not say, You are lying. It merely accepts repeated suggestions when accompanied by relaxation and feeling. Night after night she whispered these words, and little by little the image of fear began to fade, replaced by a new image of serenity and poise. The results astonished her. Within a week, she stood before her judges in an audition and sang with a freedom and beauty she had never known. The old trembling had vanished, the paralysis of fear dissolved, her voice soared with confidence. She was not healed by wishful thinking, nor by luck, nor by chance, but by the immutable law that the subconscious must express what is impressed. When she whispered new words with conviction, she rewrote the inner script, and the body conformed without resistance. What had seemed an incurable defect was revealed to be nothing more than a corrupted suggestion, and once that suggestion was replaced with truth, her destiny shifted instantly. This story, while about music, is in truth about life itself. Every fear, every sickness, every failure is but a misdirected suggestion, an image rehearsed until the subconscious accepts it. Just as the singer whispered a new identity into her subconscious, so you can whisper a new identity into your DNA, your cells, your circumstances. If fear of sickness has been rehearsed in your mind, replace it with the affirmation of health. If images of failure have been repeated, replace them with the vision of success. If the subconscious has been saturated with resentment or inferiority, whisper forgiveness, whisper worthiness, whisper love. The law is impartial. It does not matter whether the subject is voice or body, music or health, money or relationships. The subconscious responds to suggestion, and what is impressed with feeling must be expressed in form. Therefore, let the singer's story serve as a testimony of hope. Just as she rewrote her future by whispering words of faith, so can you rewrite your future by whispering to your DNA. Each night before sleep, let your final words be words of life. Every cell of me is calm, whole, vibrant. My body is aligned with divine harmony. I sleep in peace and wake renewed. These whispers are not empty. They are seeds planted in the soil of the subconscious. And as surely as the harvest follows the seed, so too will your body and your life reflect the pattern you impress. What once seemed impossible becomes natural, for the law cannot be broken. The subconscious expresses what it receives, and it receives whatever you persistently, lovingly, faithfully whisper into it. From testimony, we move deeper into the very core of Joseph Murphy's theology, for behind every story of healing, success, or transformation lies the unwavering principle that God is not distant, capricious, or external, but indwelling, constant, and intimately woven into the subconscious life of man. To Murphy, when Scripture declares, "The kingdom of God is within you," it is not speaking in metaphor alone, but unveiling the astonishing truth that the infinite intelligence, the divine healer, the eternal pattern of perfection resides already at the center of your being. The subconscious is not merely psychological machinery. It is the workshop of the divine, the altar upon which every prayer is answered, the field where every seed of belief takes root. Thus, to commune with your subconscious is to commune with God. To speak to your DNA is to speak into the very temple where the Spirit of God dwells. This realization, once grasped, dissolves the old notion of a God who must be persuaded to intervene and replaces it with the radiant truth of a God who is already at work in the hidden depths of your mind and body, awaiting only your agreement and cooperation. This theological direction reframes the entire concept of healing. No longer is health seen as a gift reluctantly bestowed by a distant deity, nor as a rare accident of biology, but as the natural expression of the divine image implanted within every human soul. You are not begging God to rewrite your destiny. You are aligning with the law that God already wrote into your being, the law that wholeness is your true state, abundance your rightful inheritance, joy your natural atmosphere. DNA, in this view, is not a chain of chemicals dictating your fate, but the parchment upon which the divine code is written. And when you whisper to your subconscious in faith, you are not attempting to override nature, but to restore nature to its highest expression, to clear away the lies of fear and let the truth of God shine through. Consider how this reframing liberates the soul from superstition and despair. A man who believes that sickness is sent as punishment from God will resign himself to suffering, for who can resist divine wrath? But a man who understands that sickness is the product of false belief impressed upon the subconscious, and that God's will is always health, will rise with confidence to impress new images of harmony, knowing that infinite intelligence supports him. A woman who believes that poverty is a holy virtue may accept lack with grim pride, but a woman who knows that abundance is the natural law of life, that circulation and increase are the rhythms of the divine order, will boldly affirm prosperity, whispering nightly, "I give freely and receive endlessly. I live under the law of circulation and increase." Her subconscious, hearing these words charged with belief, will arrange circumstances to manifest them, for it is always the servant of the law within. This truth also harmonizes with the great metaphysical analogies found throughout Scripture. When Jesus healed the sick, he did not beg the Father for special intervention. He declared with authority, "Be it done unto you according to your faith," and the healing followed. Why? Because the subconscious, saturated with faith, expressed wholeness immediately. When he said, "The Father within me doeth the works," he revealed precisely what Murphy proclaimed, that the subconscious mind infused with divine life is the agent of transformation. And when he taught, "Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh," he was pointing to the same law. The subconscious, filled with images of health, love, and peace, will express them through the body and the life. Filled with fear and resentment, it will express those instead. The law is eternal, impartial, and universal, operating whether or not one is aware of it. Therefore, to whisper to your DNA is not to practice some modern fantasy of biohacking, but to obey the oldest of laws, the law that God dwells within, that the image you impress becomes flesh, that faith translates invisible truth into visible manifestation. The spiritual task is not to strive, not to manipulate, not to fight, but to rest in the assurance that the kingdom is within, that the divine code is uncorrupted, that the subconscious is always listening, always ready to respond. Your whispered affirmation is the voice of the Spirit, reminding the subconscious of what is eternally true, that you are created in the image and likeness of God, that every cell of your body is a temple of the living Spirit, and that no lie of sickness or bondage has the authority to erase that fact. So let this theology become practice. Tonight, when you lie upon your bed, close your eyes and whisper, God within me is my life, my strength, my health. The code of divine perfection governs every cell, every organ, every thought of mine. I sleep in the kingdom. I wake in renewal. As you say this, know that you are not pleading with an external deity, but communing with the divine presence in your very being, impressing truth upon the subconscious, that is both the servant of your thought and the dwelling place of God. And when you rise, expect renewal, for the law is absolute. What is impressed with faith upon the God within is expressed unfailingly in the life without. Once the listener begins to grasp that the subconscious mind is the dwelling place of the divine image, and that every cell is designed to obey the whispers of faith, the natural question arises, how does one restore the original perfection when so much evidence of disorder surrounds them? Here, Joseph Murphy introduces the practice of recalling the divine blueprint, of deliberately bringing into consciousness the awareness that no sickness, no failure, no inherited limitation is ultimate reality. He would remind his students that appearances deceive, that what we see with the eyes is not final truth, but the shadow of thought, and that by impressing a higher pattern upon the subconscious we dissolve the false appearance and allow the eternal design to emerge. The practice, then, is not to deny the existence of pain or trouble, but to refuse to grant them authority, to insist in the silence of one's heart that there is a deeper order, a hidden perfection, waiting to manifest. Consider the image of a cracked mirror. One who looks into it may see his reflection distorted, bent, and fragmented, and he may conclude that he himself is disfigured. But the distortion lies not in the face, but in the mirror. In the same way, the sickness, the poverty, the failure one perceives is not the true self, but the fractured reflection of a corrupted mental image. The divine blueprint, the original face, remains untouched. Murphy's task was to teach men and women to stop identifying with the distortion and to begin affirming the reality of the perfect image behind it. He taught them to whisper affirmations that recall the original pattern, such as, "The blueprint of God is my true reality. Every cell of my body reflects divine perfection now." By such words, repeated with feeling, the subconscious is reminded of the truth it has always carried, and the body and the future begin to conform to that truth. Murphy emphasized that no condition is beyond correction because the divine pattern cannot be destroyed. Just as the sun continues to shine above even the darkest storm clouds, so the blueprint of health and harmony shines eternally within, awaiting only the dispersal of the clouds of fear and false belief. A tumor, a chronic disease, a lifelong sense of failure, these may appear immovable, but they are merely dense clouds, temporary obstructions. The moment the subconscious is impressed with the truth of the divine pattern, the clouds begin to thin, the light begins to shine, and healing begins to unfold. The process may be swift or gradual, dramatic or subtle, but the direction is always toward restoration, because the blueprint exerts an irresistible pull toward its own expression once it is reawakened. Imagine then the nightly ritual of recalling this perfection. As you lay in bed, you close your eyes and deliberately turn away from the evidence of disorder. You no longer rehearse the pains of the body or the failures of the day. Instead, you visualize the radiant double helix of divine light within you, glowing, unbroken, flawless. You whisper slowly, "I am whole now. The perfect code governs my being. I am aligned with the eternal pattern of health." As you speak these words, you allow the image of wholeness to fill your mind, to crowd out all other impressions. The subconscious, passive and receptive, receives the suggestion, and while you sleep, it begins to translate the image into the processes of the body. The cells are reminded of their original design. The DNA is instructed to express harmony. The body becomes a canvas for the divine artist once again. Philosophically, this practice is nothing less than the reassertion of spiritual reality over illusion. The world says you are broken, but the blueprint says you are whole. The world says you are bound by heredity, but the blueprint says you are free in God. The world says decline and decay are inevitable, but the blueprint says renewal is eternal. To recall the divine pattern is to choose which voice you will believe, which image you will impress, which law you will obey. And Murphy would insist that when you side with the eternal, the temporal must yield. When you affirm the truth, the lie must dissolve. When you recall the original blueprint, the distorted reflection must give way to the radiant face of divine perfection. Therefore, do not despair at appearances, no matter how dark. Instead, whisper nightly into the silence, "The perfect blueprint of God governs me now." Every cell, every organ, every thought is aligned with divine harmony. I remember who I am, whole, radiant, free. These words, spoken with feeling, are not idle syllables, but seeds of restoration, reminders to the subconscious of the truth it has never forgotten. And once reminded, it will do what it always does. It will express the impression, it will obey the command, it will restore the pattern. For the divine blueprint is eternal, and to recall it is to summon into visibility the health, peace, and abundance that have been yours all along. When Joseph Murphy guided his students into the art of speaking directly to their own selves, he was revealing not only a method of healing, but a profound metaphysical truth. That every particle of the body is alive with intelligence, that every strand of DNA is responsive to thought, that every organ is obedient to the commands whispered into the subconscious. He would remind them that the subconscious mind never tires, never sleeps, never resists. It listens ceaselessly to the impressions handed to it by the conscious mind and faithfully transmits them into the functions of the body. Thus, when one lies quietly before sleep and begins to whisper words of life, one is in fact addressing an entire inner congregation of trillions of cells, each awaiting instruction, each eager to follow the new decree. The body is not a stubborn rebel, but a loyal servant. It does not question the logic of the command, it only executes. To speak to your cells is therefore to speak to the very workshop of creation within you, and to direct with authority the forces that govern your future health and vitality. Murphy taught that such speaking must be gentle, rhythmic, and filled with conviction, for the subconscious responds not to frantic commands but to calm, confident impressions. He would instruct his listeners to relax completely, to feel the weight of the body sinking into the bed, to let the conscious chatter grow still, and then, in a voice as though speaking to a beloved child, to murmur phrases such as, "Every cell of my body hears me now. Every cell is saturated with divine life. Every cell is aligned with perfect harmony." Spoken in this manner, the words bypass resistance and sink into the subconscious, which in turn impresses them upon the silent machinery of the body. The cells, once marching to the drumbeat of fear or disease, hear the new command and begin to change their rhythm. The DNA, once expressing inherited distortions, is reminded of the original code and adjusts its expression accordingly. The body does not argue, it obeys. To illustrate, Murphy would often cite the analogy of a ship and its captain. The conscious mind is the captain, issuing commands. The subconscious is the crew, carrying out the orders without question. If the captain cries, "We are sinking! Disaster is near!" the crew does not pause to argue. They rush to enact the command, preparing for wreckage. But if the captain calmly declares, "All is well, the course is steady, we are safe," the crew likewise acts in accordance, maintaining order and stability. So it is with your body. If your conscious mind whispers each night, "I am sick, I am doomed, I cannot escape," the subconscious and the cells obey that order, producing the very sickness you dread. But if you whisper, "I am whole, I am renewed, every part of me reflects divine life," the subconscious and the cells likewise obey. producing health and vitality. The law is exact and impartial. What is impressed is expressed. Murphy emphasized that this practice must be done with faith, for without faith, words are hollow. Yet faith does not require struggle, it requires feeling. To whisper, "Every cell is filled with light," while imagining golden light flowing through your bloodstream, while feeling gratitude as though it were already accomplished, is to impress the subconscious with living images. This is why visualization and affirmation must be joined. The one supplies the words, the other supplies the pictures, and together they saturate the subconscious with conviction. And once conviction is established, the subconscious moves into action with absolute certainty, mobilizing every process of the body to fulfill the decree. Thus, speaking to your cells is not a fanciful exercise, but a direct application of spiritual law. You are already speaking to them each day, though often unconsciously. Every fearful thought, every anxious word, every hidden resentment is a command given to the subconscious, which faithfully passes it on to the body. The invitation of Murphy's teaching is to become conscious of this dialogue, to seize the authority of speech, and to direct it deliberately toward life, health, and harmony. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, do not rehearse the fears of heredity or the pain of the past. Instead, whisper calmly, "Every cell of me is radiant with the life of God. Every cell obeys divine order. I am healed, I am renewed, I am whole." Fall asleep with these words echoing in your mind, and know that as you rest, your subconscious is transmitting them to the body, and your DNA is writing a new script, a script of wholeness, vitality, and divine perfection. There is a reason Joseph Murphy placed such extraordinary emphasis on the moments before sleep. He knew that this transitional state between waking and slumber is the golden gate through which the subconscious is most easily reached, the sacred threshold where whispered affirmations become living decrees. In the ordinary hours of the day, the conscious mind stands like a sentinel at the door of the subconscious, questioning, doubting, analyzing, often rejecting the very suggestions we seek to impress. But as the body grows heavy, the breath deepens, and the conscious guard begins to fade, the door swings open, and impressions flow directly into the subconscious without resistance. This is why the ancient mystics spoke of night prayers, why Scripture declares, "On my bed I remember you, I think of you through the watches of the night," and why Murphy insisted that the last thought before sleep is the seed most likely to germinate. For 8 hours while you sleep, the subconscious broods over the impression it received, weaving it into the tissues of your body, inscribing it into the code of your DNA, and arranging circumstances in accordance with it. Murphy explained that the whisper itself must be more than rote repetition. It must be clothed in imagination and feeling. When you say, "I am whole, I am strong, I am aligned with divine order," you are not performing a mechanical exercise, but planting a living seed. And as every farmer knows, the seed must be buried in soil fertile with warmth and moisture if it is to sprout. The warmth is your feeling. The moisture is your imagination. Without them, the seed lies dormant. But when the affirmation is spoken with gratitude, when the image of health is vividly painted in the mind, when the emotion of peace is allowed to flow, the subconscious receives the seed and begins the process of growth immediately. And the miracle is that this process does not require conscious effort, just as you do not strain to heal a cut on your finger, so you do not need to strain to manifest the healing you have impressed. The subconscious, once instructed, takes over and performs the work silently, perfectly, inexorably. Picture for a moment the ritual of this practice. You are lying in your bed, the noise of the day fading, the burdens of thought dissolving. You close your eyes and see in the theater of your mind a radiant current of light descending gently through your body. You whisper softly, "Every strand of my DNA vibrates with divine harmony. Every cell is filled with life. I sleep in the presence of God and awaken renewed." You see the light flowing through your bloodstream, illuminating each cell like a tiny lamp glowing with perfection. You feel the peace of harmony settling into your bones, your muscles, your nerves. You allow yourself to drift into sleep, with this image alive and this feeling strong, and you trust that the subconscious, like a faithful gardener, is working while you rest, tending the seed you have planted. Murphy often reminded his audience that people unknowingly misuse this law each night by rehearsing their fears and resentments in the moments before sleep. They whispered, "I am afraid of tomorrow. I am sick. I am weak. I am unlucky." And then they wonder why life continues to serve them bitter fruit. The subconscious, impartial and obedient, has no sense of humor. It takes the whispered word seriously and expresses it faithfully. The poison rehearsed before sleep becomes the harvest of tomorrow, just as the blessing whispered in faith becomes the miracle of renewal. The difference lies not in the power of the subconscious, which is always the same, but in the content of the suggestion given. This is why Murphy was relentless in urging his listeners to choose their last thoughts carefully, to make the final word before sleep a word of truth, health, and abundance. Therefore, let this be your nightly practice. As you drift towards sleep, whisper with serenity, "I rest now in divine health. I awaken, refreshed and renewed. Every cell of me is alive with the power of God." Do not strive, do not argue, do not analyze. Simply speak as one who knows, as one who trusts, as one who has discovered the law of life. With repetition, the old patterns of fear dissolve, the corrupted codes fade, and the subconscious inscribes anew the original design. And as surely as morning follows night, so wholeness will follow faith, so health will follow affirmations, so abundance will follow gratitude. For the subconscious is always at work, and what you whisper in faith before sleep is the command it cannot refuse to obey. Once one has grasped the sacred potency of whispering words of life before sleep, it becomes natural to expand this practice into a more elaborate art, the creation of a mental movie, a vivid and living scene played upon the screen of imagination and impressed upon the subconscious until it accepts it as fact. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious cannot distinguish between a real event and an imagined one when the image is accompanied by feeling. It accepts both as truth and goes to work producing conditions to match. Therefore, to rehearse night after night a vision of failure, sickness, or loss is to deliver to the subconscious a command to produce precisely that outcome. But to rehearse instead a vision of success, health, and fulfillment is to provide the subconscious with a divine script to enact in the body in the future. The whispered affirmation supplies the words, and the mental movie supplies the imagery, and together they engrave the pattern deeper than either alone could achieve. Imagine, then, the listener preparing for sleep, not merely repeating words, but stepping into a scene of healing as though it were already accomplished. The man afflicted with disease does not beg for health. He pictures himself running in the open air, feeling strength in his body, hearing the laughter of loved ones as they marvel at his vitality. The woman weighed down with fear does not whisper mechanically, "I am safe," while still imagining danger. She constructs in her inner theater a scene where she walks serenely through life, radiant with peace, embraced by divine light, untouched by harm. The one impoverished does not rehearse lack, but imagines himself writing a generous check, blessing others, receiving gratitude, and feeling the joy of circulation. These scenes, replayed nightly with conviction, sink into the subconscious, and the subconscious, incapable of distinguishing dream from reality, begins to mobilize all inner and outer resources to bring them forth. Murphy insisted that the emotional tone of these movies is the secret ingredient. It is not enough to visualize vaguely. One must feel the joy of accomplishment, the relief of freedom, the peace of health, as though it were already present. He called this the assumption of the feeling of the wish fulfilled. To whisper, "I am healed," and to imagine yourself in pain is contradiction, but to whisper the same and then picture yourself radiant with vitality while feeling gratitude as if the healing were already done is harmony. The subconscious accepts the harmony and begins its work. This is the law behind what modern science calls the placebo effect, and behind what mystics have called answered prayer. The subconscious executes the image charged with faith, whether delivered by medicine, ritual, or whisper. Consider the metaphor of a blueprint handed to a builder. The builder does not question whether the plan is realistic. He does not argue with the architect. He simply builds according to the design. The subconscious is the builder, and the mental movie is the blueprint. Handed a blueprint of health and prosperity, and it constructs those realities with mathematical precision. Handed a blueprint of fear and failure, and it constructs those with equal fidelity. The choice of blueprint is yours, and the moment of greatest opportunity is the twilight of consciousness before sleep, when the builder is most attentive to the plans being submitted. Therefore, Murphy's counsel is both simple and profound. Construct your movie carefully. Fill it with the colors of faith and gratitude. Let it run through your mind as you drift into sleep, and allow the subconscious to play it out upon the stage of life. Night after night persist, even if results seem slow, for repetition is the law of impression. Just as drops of water carve the stone, so repeated images carve themselves into the subconscious until they become reality. Whisper the words, see the scene, feel the joy, and surrender to sleep, confident that the law cannot fail. For what is impressed must be expressed, and what is rehearsed in the theater of the mind will inevitably be enacted in the theater of life. When we begin to see the subconscious not merely as a passive receiver of impressions, but as the living physician, the silent surgeon, the tireless caretaker of our entire organism, then we grasp why Murphy declared it the inner healer. This inner healer is ceaseless in its labor, regulating heartbeat and breath, knitting tissues, mending bones, purifying blood, digesting food, eliminating waste, all without the slightest conscious effort. You do not awaken each morning to remind your heart to beat or your lungs to expand. These functions are carried out with flawless precision by the intelligence dwelling in the subconscious. And this same intelligence, which governs the minutiae of life, is also responsive to the instructions of your belief. If you feed it fear, it may turn its creative power toward producing illness. If you feed it faith, it directs its resources toward health and vitality. It is impartial, unwearied, inexhaustible, but always obedient. Murphy reminded his students that this inner physician has healed countless wounds and cured innumerable diseases without fanfare simply because it was allowed to function unhindered. He urged them to stop interfering with the process by impressing the subconscious with fear and worry. A cut finger closes without anxiety. A broken bone knits itself with uncanny precision. Why then should we doubt that more complex conditions can be healed? The subconscious knows how. The intelligence that formed your body in the womb, cell by cell, organ by organ, knows also how to restore and renew it. The only obstacle is the contradictory suggestion that denies this truth, the constant rehearsal of sickness and doom that drowns out the voice of faith. Think of a master craftsman working diligently at his bench, shaping wood into a work of art. If the apprentice continually interrupts him with cries of panic, "You are failing, this will not work, disaster is coming," the craftsman cannot work freely, his hands are hindered. But if the apprentice speaks with confidence, "I trust your skill, I know you will finish perfectly," then the craftsman proceeds unhindered, and the work emerges in beauty. The subconscious is that craftsman. Fear is interruption. Faith is cooperation. When you whisper affirmations of health, you are not trying to force the subconscious into action. You are removing interference, allowing it to perform its natural work with divine precision. Murphy's teachings aligned with the ancient wisdom that the body is the temple of the living God. To speak to your subconscious with reverence is to commune with the very presence that dwells within. When you whisper before sleep, "The infinite healing presence restores me now," you are calling upon no distant deity, but the divine physician already active in your bloodstream, in your nervous system, in your DNA. And this physician does not delay. The very moment the subconscious accepts the suggestion, healing processes are set in motion, sometimes subtle, sometimes dramatic, but always real. Even if outward results appear gradual, the inner work is immediate, just as a seed begins to germinate the instant it is planted, though the sprout may not be visible for days. The metaphor Murphy often used was that of the subconscious as the soil, the suggestion as the seed, and the body as the harvest. If you plant seeds of fear, disease is the crop. If you plant seeds of faith, wholeness is the harvest. The soil does not discriminate. It accepts whatever seed is given. The law is impersonal and absolute. Thus, the responsibility rests with you. What will you plant nightly in the fertile ground of your subconscious? Will you scatter weeds of worry, or will you sow golden seeds of health? For the soil will produce accordingly, and the harvest will be inescapable. So, tonight when you lie down, envision yourself in the care of this inner physician. Whisper, "The divine intelligence within me restores and renews every cell of my body. I rest in peace knowing the work is done." Let this be your prescription, your treatment, your medicine. No outer ritual is needed, no desperate plea, only the serene assurance that the inner healer is already at work. And when you awaken, give thanks, for gratitude seals the suggestion and accelerates its expression. In this way, you cooperate with a silent surgeon within, and your body becomes the visible testimony of the eternal law, that the subconscious, when impressed with truth, must express health, harmony, and life abundant. There is perhaps no greater evidence of the law of belief at work than what the world calls the placebo effect, and Joseph Murphy pointed to it as a startling yet undeniable testimony of the subconscious mind's dominion over the body. Time and again, medical journals have recorded cases where patients, given a sugar pill or a harmless injection, experienced profound healing simply because they believed they had received powerful medicine. Tumors shrank, pain dissolved, symptoms vanished, not because of any chemical property of the pill, but because the subconscious, convinced of healing, set in motion the processes that produced it. Murphy seized upon these examples to proclaim a truth far deeper than any pharmacology. It is not the tablet swallowed, but the belief entertained that performs the healing. The subconscious obeys the command of conviction, and the body manifests accordingly. The placebo effect, then, is not anomaly, but law, a window into the universal principle that thought governs flesh. Murphy went further, insisting that this same law applies to every area of life. Just as the body responds to belief in medicine, so finances respond to belief in prosperity, relationships to belief in harmony, and destiny to belief in possibility. The subconscious is a mirror, reflecting not what we casually wish, but what we deeply believe. If you believe you are doomed to illness, the subconscious obliges, producing conditions to match. If you believe you are destined to thrive, the subconscious just as obediently arranges the body and the circumstances to fulfill that decree. In this sense, faith is not merely a theological virtue, but a biological power, a spiritual law that edits even the codes of DNA, switching on the genes of vitality, silencing the programs of decay, and orchestrating the symphony of health. Your faith literally speaks louder than your genes. To illustrate, Murphy loved to cite cases of men and women who defied hereditary disease by sheer conviction of health. Families where every ancestor had succumbed to a certain illness often produced individuals who broke the pattern entirely, not by external advantage, but by internal belief. They refused to accept the curse of heredity, affirming instead the law of divine health, and the subconscious, receiving this new pattern, rewrote the story of their bodies. Science calls it anomaly. Murphy calls it law. The subconscious always expresses what it is impressed with most deeply, and belief is the pen that writes the impression. The metaphor is simple, yet profound. DNA is like a vast library of books, some volumes filled with stories of health, others with tales of sickness, some chapters of joy, others of despair. Belief is the librarian who decides which book is opened, which chapter is read aloud, which story is allowed to unfold in the stage of the body. If you believe in weakness, the subconscious takes that book off the shelf and reads it until it becomes your experience. If you believe in strength, the subconscious selects a different volume and reads that instead. The library contains many possibilities, but the voice of belief determines which story becomes your reality. And so Murphy's challenge is as clear as it is liberating. What story are you allowing to be read into your life? Are you passively accepting the tale of heredity, doom, and inevitability, or are you actively selecting the chapter of divine health, abundance, and freedom? Each night before sleep, you have the power to hand the subconscious a new script, a new page, a new decree. Whisper, I choose a story of life. I choose a book of health. I choose a chapter of renewal. Repeat it until you feel it. Imagine it until you believe it. Believe it until the subconscious accepts it. For once belief is established, the law takes over, and the subconscious must express it. Thus, the so-called placebo effect is not a curiosity, but the very demonstration of divine law. It proves that your belief commands your body, that your faith edits your DNA, that your conviction writes the script of your future. What science glimpses as mystery, Murphy proclaims as principle. The subconscious is the faithful servant of belief, and belief itself is the voice of God within you declaring what shall be. Therefore, stand guard over your faith. Whisper only what you desire, impress only what uplifts, and let every night be the rehearsal of the reality you choose to see expressed in the morning. For as surely as seed produces harvest, so faith produces form, and your world, your body, your very cells will unfailingly echo the story your belief has chosen. If belief is the engine of transformation, then its greatest enemies are the silent saboteurs that creep into the subconscious in the form of fear, doubt, guilt, resentment, and self-condemnation. For these corrosive states act like distortions in the code of life, bending the perfect script of divine order into twisted sequences of dis-ease and disorder. Joseph Murphy warned with relentless clarity that negative emotions are not harmless moods that pass unnoticed. They are active suggestions impressed upon the subconscious, whispered decrees that are obeyed as faithfully as affirmations of health and abundance. Fear, rehearsed long enough, becomes a standing command for the subconscious to produce danger and sickness. Guilt, nurtured for years, programs the body to punish itself with pain and failure. Resentment poisons the well of vitality, filling the bloodstream with the chemical echoes of bitterness. Inferiority binds the soul with chains of unworthiness, convincing the subconscious that it must withhold blessing. These emotions are not passive, they are directives, coding the DNA with corrupted instructions until the body itself mirrors the inner turmoil. Murphy's prescription for these poisons was not repression, but substitution. Just as darkness cannot be fought with fists, but must be displaced with light, so fear is not to be suppressed, but dissolved by faith, guilt not to be ignored, but released through forgiveness, resentment not to be justified, but transmuted into love, inferiority not to be endured, but replaced with the recognition of divine sonship. He would say again and again, the subconscious accepts whatever is impressed upon it with feeling and repetition. It does not distinguish between poison and antidote. It only knows how to obey. Thus, the task of the seeker is to choose carefully the emotional tones that saturate the subconscious. For those tones become the atmosphere in which every cell breathes, the environment in which DNA expresses, the invisible climate of the future itself. Picture your inner life as a vast garden. Fear is a choking weed, guilt a creeping vine, resentment a thorn bush, inferiority a pest gnawing at the roots. Left unchecked, they overrun the soil, strangling the flowers of health and joy. But the garden need not be abandoned, for the soil remains fertile, always ready to grow what is planted. The weeds can be uprooted by planting new seeds, faith that blossoms into courage, forgiveness that grows into freedom, gratitude that blooms into joy, self-worth that rises into abundance. Nightly whispers are the act of planting. Repeated affirmations are the watering. Emotional conviction is the sunlight. Given time and persistence, the garden transforms, not because the weeds were fought, but because the flowers outgrew them, because the soil was impressed with a higher pattern. Consider how this works in the laboratory of life. A man steeped in fear of illness may find his body manifesting the very symptoms he dreads. For the subconscious, hearing daily the emotional command of fear obliges with obedience. Yet if that same man, instead of rehearsing his dread, begins nightly to whisper, I am filled with divine courage, every cell of me vibrates with love and strength, And if he couples these words with the image of radiant health, the subconscious gradually abandons the old program of fear and installs the new code of vitality. The body then responds accordingly. Symptoms fade and health is restored. The law is impartial. Fear and faith are both seeds, but they bear different fruit. Murphy knew that emotions are not incidental to prayer, they are its very essence. To affirm with cold lips but anxious heart is to impress fear, not faith. To whisper words of love while harboring resentment is to sow thorns and roses together, leaving the soil confused and the harvest mixed. Therefore he urged his students to align their feelings with their words, to let the whisper before sleep be more than empty syllables, to let it be charged with the warmth of conviction. For once the subconscious feels the emotional force behind the words, it accepts them as commands and the cells respond. And so the work of cleansing fear and installing faith is not dramatic but deliberate. Each night before you sleep, take a single poison and replace it with its antidote. Whisper, I dissolve all fear, I rest in divine courage. Or, I release all resentment, love fills me now. Or, I forgive myself completely, I am free in God's grace. Or, I am worthy, I am chosen, I am a child of infinite intelligence. Repeat until you feel the truth stirring within, even faintly, for that faint stirring is the seed taking root. And know with certainty that the subconscious is already receiving the new code, already inscribing it into the body, already orchestrating the expression of harmony. For negative emotions may poison, but faith, love, forgiveness, and worthiness are the antidotes that heal, and once impressed, they must be expressed. Until the body and the future shine once more with the order of divine perfection. Among all the poisons that warp the inner code, Joseph Murphy placed particular emphasis on resentment, for he recognized it as one of the most subtle yet most destructive distortions of the subconscious pattern. Resentment is a secret fire smoldering in the heart, often hidden from others but burning continuously within, releasing toxic impressions that the subconscious accepts as law. The one who resents believes they are punishing the offender, yet in truth they are punishing themselves, feeding their subconscious a steady diet of bitterness that manifests as ulcers in the stomach, tension in the nerves, rigidity in the joints, or even chronic poverty in affairs. For the subconscious does not distinguish between past and present. It obeys the vivid emotion impressed upon it, and resentment replays the injury, as though it were happening anew each day. Thus the body and the life echo the grievance, producing disorder, disharmony, and disease as faithful reflections of the unresolved inner script. Murphy's solution was radical in its simplicity. Forgiveness. He taught that forgiveness is not condoning injustice, nor pretending the offense never occurred. It is releasing the emotional poison so that the subconscious may once again reflect divine order. Forgiveness, he declared, is not for the offender, but for the soul of the one who forgives, for only then is the prison of bitterness unlocked. He would tell his students, you are mentally tied to the person you hate or resent. The more you hate, the more you are bound to them. The only way to be free is to cut the cord with love. When you whisper before sleep, I freely and fully forgive everyone, including myself. Divine love floods my heart and sets me free. You are in effect erasing the corrupted lines in the subconscious code, allowing the original blueprint of harmony to shine again. Theologically, forgiveness restores alignment with the Christ principle. Jesus declared, forgive, and you shall be forgiven. Not as a moral recommendation, but as a spiritual law. The subconscious, when cleansed of resentment, becomes receptive once more to the flow of divine blessing. Holding on to grudges blocks this flow as surely as a clogged artery blocks the circulation of blood. Just as the body weakens when circulation is obstructed, so the soul weakens when love is withheld. To forgive, then, is to restore circulation, to let life and health and abundance flow freely again. And when forgiveness is impressed deeply into the subconscious, even hereditary patterns of bitterness and disease dissolve, for love is the most potent antidote, the universal solvent of all poison. Murphy would often share testimonies of those who experienced immediate transformation through forgiveness. He told of a woman tormented by arthritis, her joints stiffened by years of resentment against her former husband. No medicine brought relief. No treatment dissolved the pain. At last, under Murphy's counsel, she began nightly to whisper, "I release him completely. I forgive him and set him free. I am free, and God's love fills me." At first she resisted, clinging to her anger, but with persistence she began to feel a softening within, a loosening of the tight grip of bitterness. Within weeks, her pain subsided, her mobility returned, her face glowed with vitality. The subconscious, once saturated with resentment, had received a new command, and the body followed in obedience. What medicine could not accomplish, forgiveness did, because the true disease had never been in the joints but in the heart. Philosophically, forgiveness is the ultimate act of rewriting destiny. To hold resentment is to keep reading the same chapter of pain, to replay endlessly the same scene of betrayal. To forgive is to close that book and open a new one, to hand the subconscious a fresh script untainted by bitterness. Each night that you whisper forgiveness, you hand your DNA a new command, and it begins to express vitality instead of decay, peace instead of tension, freedom instead of bondage. The past may remain in memory, but its power over your future dissolves, for the subconscious no longer feeds upon it. So tonight, if resentment has been gnawing at your heart, let this be your ritual. Close your eyes. Imagine the one you resent standing before you and whisper with feeling, "I release you. I forgive you. I set you free, and I am free." If self-condemnation burdens you, whisper, "I forgive myself completely. I am worthy of love. I am worthy of life." Do this nightly, and know that each repetition is dissolving the poison, restoring circulation, cleansing the subconscious of corrupted images, and allowing the divine pattern of health to emerge. For forgiveness is not weakness but strength, not surrender but victory, not loss but liberation. It is the act of reclaiming your future from the grip of the past, the spiritual surgery that removes the tumor of resentment and restores the body to harmony. And in the silence of sleep, the subconscious cleansed of poison begins again to reflect the radiant order of divine life. When one finally reaches the place of inner release, where resentment has been dissolved and fear has been transmuted into faith, there arises a profound realization that the self one has been lamenting, repairing, and struggling to improve was never the true self at all. Joseph Murphy proclaimed with absolute certainty that the new you is not something laboriously built from scraps of brokenness, but the eternal reality that has always been present beneath the layers of illusion. The divine blueprint, hidden beneath the false suggestions of heredity and the scars of past impressions, is indestructible, and when you align with it, you are not creating a new life so much as uncovering the one that was written from the beginning. This is why Murphy insisted that healing and prosperity are not extraordinary miracles but restorations, not interventions from outside, but reassertions of what is already within. To declare, "I am whole," is not to fantasize, but to remember. To affirm, "I prosper," is not to fabricate, but to awaken what infinite intelligence has coded into the very fabric of your being. Philosophically, this understanding brings to rest the age-old conflict between fate and free will. You are neither a pawn condemned to the rigid determinism of genetic fate, nor a wanderer lost in the universe of chaos. Rather, you are a co-creator with God, endowed with the freedom to choose whether you will align with the corrupted image impressed by fear or the eternal image impressed by spirit. Fate is not the tyranny of genes, but the inertia of belief. Freedom is not licensed to invent a self ex nihilo, but the sacred right to reclaim the divine script that was written for you. When you say, "I am new," you are not constructing something alien to your being. You are clearing away the dust, polishing the mirror, opening the shutters, so that the light of the eternal self may shine unobstructed. Murphy loved to use the metaphor of a software update long before such language became common. He would say that your subconscious is like a great computer, always running programs. Some of these programs are corrupted beliefs of sickness, codes of failure, inherited lines of poverty, yet behind them lies the original program written by the infinite, flawless, radiant, eternal. When you whisper affirmations of wholeness and prosperity, you are downloading that original program anew, erasing the malware of fear and guilt, restoring the system to its pristine condition. Just as a machine riddled with errors can be restored by reinstalling its original operating system, so too can your life be restored by reasserting the divine reality that has never been lost. The process is not one of frantic labor, but of quiet alignment, of trusting that the original code is intact and allowing it to govern once again. Consider the testimony of those who, after years of illness or despair, suddenly declared with conviction, "I will not live this way any longer. I am a child of God. I claim my health, my joy, my abundance now." Such declarations, when repeated with faith, have turned lives around dramatically. The outward world may scoff and call it coincidence, yet Murphy assures us it is law. The moment the subconscious accepts the new image, it must express it. The new self appears, not because it was created in that instant, but because it was waiting, concealed beneath falsehood, longing to be revealed. This is the deeper meaning of the Apostle Paul's words. "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." Transformation is not fabrication, it is revelation. Renewal is not invention, it is remembrance. Therefore, let this truth settle into the heart. The new you is already written. Your DNA is not a fixed decree of limitation, but the parchment upon which the divine code of perfection lies inscribed. False impressions may have smudged the ink, but they cannot erase it. Each night when you whisper, "I am whole, I am free, I am radiant with divine life," you are not imagining something impossible, but reasserting what is eternally true. The subconscious accepts the reminder. The cells obey the command, and the body, circumstances, and future align with the restored pattern. The work is not to struggle for a distant goal, but to accept the present reality of the divine self. Whisper it, visualize it, feel it, and know that even now the eternal blueprint is reasserting itself, and the new you is not coming, the new you is already here. As this realization deepens that the eternal pattern of perfection is already inscribed within, and that the so-called new you is simply the unveiling of what has always been true, the soul naturally turns its gaze forward and begins to contemplate the nature of the future. Joseph Murphy declared without hesitation that the future is not a cruel lottery, nor the unfolding of blind heredity, nor the product of indifferent fate, but the child of faith. Just as the subconscious obeys the commands whispered into it regarding the body, so it likewise obeys the commands regarding destiny, opportunity, relationships, prosperity, and every aspect of life. The images you impress upon the subconscious, repeated with emotion and faith, are the seeds of your tomorrows, and the future grows precisely in accordance with them. Thus he could boldly affirm, "Your subconscious mind is the womb of creation. It receives the seed of your thought and belief and brings it forth in your experience." To grasp this truth is to step out of the narrow corridors of fear and into the spacious halls of possibility. Many go through life with a tragic script running silently in the background. "I will always fail. Nothing ever works for me. Sickness is inevitable. Love will always pass me by." These inner monologues, repeated daily, become the subconscious blueprint, and the future obligingly reflects them in circumstance after circumstance. But just as surely, one can choose to plant a different script, whispering nightly, "I am guided by divine wisdom. Every step I take leads to fulfillment. My body is radiant with health. Love surrounds me and flows through me. Abundance is mine by divine right." With persistence, these whispers become accepted by the subconscious, and once accepted, the future bends to accommodate them, for it has no choice. Philosophically, this unveils a staggering freedom. Destiny is not an immutable decree carved in stone by ancestors or biology. It is a canvas awaiting the brushstrokes of faith. The subconscious is the silent artist, and belief is the hand that guides its brush. If you hand it the paints of fear and unworthiness, it will render a bleak future of lack and sickness. If you hand it the colors of faith, joy, and love, it will paint a radiant panorama of opportunity and wholeness. The law is impartial and exact. The picture you hold with feeling is the picture that life will display upon the screen of time. Murphy would illustrate this with the parable of the farmer. The subconscious is the soil, the seeds are your thoughts, and the harvest is your future. The soil does not argue, does not discriminate, does not say, this seed is noble, that seed is ignoble. It accepts all seeds impartially and brings them forth in their season. Likewise, the subconscious accepts whatever seeds you plant, and the future is simply the harvest of those seeds. To fear tomorrow is to plant weeds. To expect blessing is to sow golden grain. And the harvest is as certain as sunrise. Therefore, the practice of whispering before sleep is not only for bodily healing, but for destiny itself. As you lie down each night, you are in fact programming your future. Every affirmation is a decree, every visualization a blueprint, every emotion a seed. Whisper, my path is guided, doors open before me, divine order directs my steps. I am destined to flourish. Feel the truth of it, as though already lived. See yourself walking with confidence into opportunities, rejoicing in fulfilled relationships, thriving in perfect health. The subconscious, receiving this movie of the future, accepts it and begins orchestrating the conditions to express it. And so Murphy calls you to embrace your future not with dread but with reverence and expectation, knowing that it is not a random unfolding but the direct offspring of the beliefs you impress tonight. Say to yourself, my future is not my heredity. My future is not my fear. My future is the child of my faith. Whisper this with conviction. Let it sink deep into the soil of your subconscious, and know that as surely as a seed grows into its likeness, your faith will grow into the visible form of your destiny. For the future is not waiting to ambush you. It is waiting to be born from you, and faith is the midwife that brings it into the world. Now, having walked through the recognition of inner poisons, the reassertion of the divine blueprint, and the understanding that the future is the child of faith, Joseph Murphy brings us at last to the practical climax, the ritual of nightly integration. All knowledge remains abstract until it is applied. All principles remain dormant until they are embodied in practice. He knew that transformation does not come from occasional bursts of inspiration, but from steady repetition, the deliberate impressing of truth upon the subconscious until it becomes second nature. And so he prescribed a sacred routine to be performed at the close of each day, a ceremony so simple in form, yet so profound in power that it has the potential to alter the trajectory of a life. He called it speaking to the subconscious before sleep, but in truth it is nothing less than rewriting the code of destiny. The ritual begins with relaxation. One lies down and deliberately releases the tension of the body. For the body at rest signals to the subconscious that it is safe to receive. Breath deepens, muscles loosen, the chatter of the conscious mind begins to subside. In this softened state, the guard of reason is lowered, and the fertile soil of the subconscious lies open. Here is the golden gate, the moment of supreme influence, the sacred twilight when suggestion penetrates without resistance. Into this state one whispers words not of fear, not of complaint, but of deliberate truth. I am whole. I am free. I am guided by divine wisdom. Every cell of my being vibrates with the order of God. Then the ritual expands into visualization. The words are clothed with images. A radiant stream of light flowing through the body, strands of DNA glowing and singing in harmony, doors of opportunity opening before the seeker, relationships filled with joy, finances flowing like rivers of supply. These pictures, vivid and emotionally charged, act as blueprints for the subconscious to follow. One sees the healed body, the flourishing life, the fulfilled destiny, and allows the feeling of accomplishment to settle in as though it were already true. Gratitude swells, not gratitude for what is hoped for, but gratitude for what is received now. For Murphy insisted that gratitude is the seal of faith, the final touch that tells the subconscious, this is done. The ritual continues with forgiveness. For what use is it to affirm health if resentment corrodes the soul, or to affirm abundance if guilt blocks the flow of supply? So before sleep one whispers, I release all who have hurt me. I forgive freely and fully. I forgive myself. Love fills me now. These words, even if at first resisted by the conscious mind, are heard and accepted by the subconscious when repeated with sincerity. And once forgiveness is impressed, the poisons dissolve, circulation is restored, and the channels of blessing are opened wide. Finally comes surrender. Having spoken truth, painted images, felt gratitude, and released resentment, one rests in faith that the subconscious will now do the work. No straining, no analyzing, no anxious watching for results. Just quiet trust, the assurance that infinite intelligence, which heals wounds and makes the heart beat without conscious command, is now at work fulfilling the decree. One falls asleep in this assurance, and while the conscious mind dreams, the subconscious is laboring, inscribing the new code upon the body and the future, weaving the pattern of wholeness into the very fabric of life. Murphy's call to action is clear. Perform this ritual for 21 nights. For repetition engrave suggestion into permanence. Whisper the affirmations, see the images, feel the gratitude, extend the forgiveness, surrender to the process, and watch as the subconscious, faithful servant of belief, translates these impressions into visible reality. The transformation may be gradual or sudden, subtle or dramatic, but it is inevitable, for the law cannot fail. What is impressed must be expressed. The DNA will obey, the cells will respond, the circumstances will rearrange, the future will be rewritten. So tonight, take this practice as your sacred work. Lie down in peace. Whisper truth into your heart, paint visions of health and abundance, forgive freely, surrender joyfully, and drift into sleep with the assurance that the miracle is already underway. For you are not bound by the past, you are not shackled by heredity, you are not imprisoned by fear. You are the living temple of God, the co-creator with infinite spirit, the author of a destiny that begins not tomorrow but tonight. In the whispers you speak to your subconscious, as you step into the healing silence of sleep, as this journey comes full circle, Joseph Murphy leaves us with the great declaration of faith alignment, the final word that seals the work of suggestion and anchors the soul in the eternal present. I am whole now. Not tomorrow, not one day in the future, not when evidence appears, but now. For Murphy taught that the subconscious mind lives only in the eternal present. It knows nothing of the future tense, and therefore any suggestion framed in postponement is perpetually delayed. To say, I will be healed, is to impress a command that healing is always somewhere ahead, never here. But to say, I am healed now, is to speak in the only language the subconscious understands, the language of the immediate. And once the subconscious accepts this declaration as fact, it begins at once to bring it into expression. This final declaration is more than affirmation. It is identity. To say, I am whole, is to align oneself with the divine blueprint, to merge the conscious self with the eternal self that has never been touched by sickness or defeat. It is to remember, as the mystics have always proclaimed, that the I am is the name of God, the creative word by which the worlds were framed. Thus, when you whisper, I am whole, you are not merely speaking positively. You are invoking the creative name, aligning your consciousness with infinite being, declaring in faith what has always been true in spirit. And spirit, once affirmed, must manifest in matter, for the unseen is the parent of the seen, and what is affirmed in the invisible is compelled to appear in the visible. Murphy urged that this declaration be made with feeling, for words alone do not penetrate. To whisper, I am whole now, while inwardly fearing illness, is to cancel the suggestion. But to whisper it with quiet confidence, to let the words swell into a feeling of peace, to imagine the body already radiant, to see in the mind's eye the DNA glowing with divine order, is to impress the subconscious with truth, and the subconscious, impartial and tireless, begins immediately to adjust every process of the body and every thread of destiny to align with that truth. It is as though the words are keys turning in the locks of every cell, opening them to the inflow of divine light. Philosophically, this act of declaring the present reality of wholeness resolves the tension between appearance and truth. Appearances may scream of pain, But the declaration insists upon the deeper reality of health. Appearances may display lack, but the affirmation claims abundance as the eternal fact. Appearances may echo fear, but the whisper asserts faith. In this way, the soul is not denying what the senses perceive, it is choosing which reality to enthrone as law. Murphy taught that when there is a conflict between the evidence of the senses and the conviction of faith, the subconscious obeys the conviction. Thus, to declare I am whole now is to choose faith over fear, truth over appearance, divine law over human limitation, and so this becomes the crowning practice. Each night, after affirmations, imagery, forgiveness, and gratitude, end with this final declaration. Whisper slowly with reverence. I am whole. I am free. I am filled with divine life now.
Let the words sink deep. Let the feeling of peace spread through the body like warm light.
See yourself rising in the morning renewed, walking through the day in strength, radiating joy to those around you. Fall asleep in this state, and know that as you sleep, the subconscious is carrying out the decree, inscribing it into your DNA, orchestrating every cell to vibrate with harmony. Murphy would insist that this is not wishful thinking but spiritual science, not optimism but law. The declaration is the final seal upon the nightly ritual, the imprint that lingers in the subconscious through the hours of slumber. And when repeated night after night, it becomes not merely a suggestion but a conviction, not merely a practice but a way of being. Then, inevitably the body and the future conform, for the subconscious must express what it has been impressed with. Thus the declaration, I am whole now, is the doorway into the lived reality of wholeness, the bridge between unseen spirit and visible form, the signature of faith upon the canvas of life. Having impressed upon the mind the final declaration of wholeness, Joseph Murphy would not allow his students to end the practice in isolation or passivity, but he would call them to carry this truth outward into the daily rhythm of life, into the collective consciousness of humanity itself. For to whisper health for yourself and then to withhold it from others is to divide the subconscious against itself, to plant seeds of harmony in one row of the garden while sowing weeds of envy and judgment in another. Murphy taught that the law of life is circulation. What you impress for yourself, you must wish for others. What you affirm within must radiate without. What you declare in secret must become your atmosphere in public. Thus he urged that the practice of nightly affirmation culminate in a call to action, a deliberate choice to share, to practice, to embody, and to extend the law into the wider field of human experience. This is why he would often end his lectures with a charge. Go and practice this truth. Say it every morning and every evening. Share it with someone ready to be healed. Write it down, repeat it, and live in it until it lives in you. He knew that repetition engraves suggestion, but he also knew that community strengthens conviction. To declare aloud, I am ready to receive divine help, and to see it echoed by others creates a collective impression, magnifying the faith of each individual. And just as one voice can whisper health into its own subconscious, so many voices can create a wave of faith that stirs the atmosphere of a home, a congregation, even a society. The subconscious mind of humanity, too, is subject to impression, and Murphy envisioned a world gradually rewritten by multitudes whispering truth instead of fear, blessing instead of curse, faith instead of fatalism. The practical call to action, then, is both intimate and expansive. On the intimate level, he urged every student to make the ritual of whispering affirmations before sleep a non-negotiable practice. Not once, not occasionally, but nightly, until it becomes as natural as brushing one's teeth or closing one's eyes. He warned that the subconscious is impressionable not only by deliberate whispers but by every thought allowed to linger, and thus vigilance is required. Choose carefully the final words of the day, for they are the seeds of tomorrow. On the expansive level, he urged students to share this truth with those in need, not with argument or coercion, but with testimony and invitation. To say, this has worked for me, try it for yourself, is to extend the healing current outward, and in doing so, to strengthen one's own conviction. Murphy tied this practice to the principle of giving and receiving. Just as circulation is the law of blood in the body and of wealth in the world, so circulation is the law of truth in the soul. When you share an affirmation with another, when you encourage them to whisper faith instead of fear, you are not depleting your own store, but multiplying it. The subconscious, impressed with generosity, responds by expanding your own experience of abundance. Thus, the call to action is also the guarantee of increase. Give away the truth, and it returns to you magnified. And so the chapter closes with a visionary image. Humanity is a choir, each individual a voice, whispering in the silence before sleep, not of doom or resentment, but of health, love, abundance, and faith. As these whispers multiply, the subconscious of humanity itself is rewritten, the collective DNA of the species recoded with harmony instead of hatred, with life instead of fear. In this vision lies the hope of a world transformed not by force or decree, but by the steady, persistent practice of individuals aligning their subconscious with the divine pattern. Murphy saw in this not only personal healing, but the dawn of a new humanity, one whisper at a time. So let the call resound. Tonight, whisper truth, and tomorrow live it. Share it with someone in need. Invite them to join you in this nightly ritual, and together write upon the tablet of the subconscious a new future. Write in your own heart, I rewrite my future now, and let it echo in the hearts of others. For the word spoken in faith never returns void. It multiplies, circulates, and transforms. And when enough voices whisper, the world itself awakens to its divine inheritance, and the prophecy is fulfilled. Behold, I make all things new. There is, at the conclusion of Murphy's great discourse, a vision far larger than the personal quest for health or prosperity, for the law of the subconscious is not confined to the individual but extends outward into the collective field of humanity. Just as each man and woman carries a subconscious mind that accepts suggestion and expresses it in body and circumstance, so too does the race mind, the vast subconscious of the species, absorb the repeated affirmations, fears, and expectations of billions, and express them as the conditions of history. Wars, poverty, epidemics, progress, revival, all these, Murphy hinted, are but the collective harvest of what humanity has planted in its shared subconscious soil. And so, when an individual whispers before sleep, it is never only for themselves. Each whisper is a thread woven into the tapestry of the world. When one person dissolves resentment and replaces it with love, they are not only healing their own selves, but altering the vibration of the collective, tipping the balance toward harmony. The law is impartial, and it magnifies whatever is impressed, whether in the mind of one or the mind of all. This is why Murphy placed such emphasis on the responsibility of the awakened soul. To know that the subconscious expresses what is impressed is to be entrusted with immense creative power. It is not merely about personal healing, but about adding one's voice to the chorus that shapes the destiny of humanity. He would say, every prayer you whisper before sleep is not only for you, but for the world. As you affirm love, you spread love. As you affirm peace, you breathe peace into the atmosphere. As you affirm abundance, you enrich the soil of humanity itself. Thus, the nightly ritual becomes not only medicine for the individual, but intercession for the race, a way of participating in the slow but certain reprogramming of human destiny. Picture a world where millions, instead of rehearsing fear each night, close their eyes and whisper affirmations of divine order. Picture homes where resentment is dissolved in forgiveness before the family drifts into sleep, where children are taught to say, I am loved, I am guided, I am whole, instead of carrying their anxieties into dreams. Imagine nations where leaders, instead of feeding fear, impress upon their people visions of unity, prosperity, and peace. The law of the subconscious would respond on a planetary scale as surely as it does within a single body. Diseases would retreat as faith replaced fear. Poverty would dissolve as prosperity, consciousness spread. Wars would subside as forgiveness, displaced resentment. For the collective future, too, is the child of faith, and the subconscious of humanity will always express the image it is most persistently given. Murphy foresaw this possibility as the next stage of evolution, not biological adaptation, but spiritual awakening, not genetic mutation, but the rewriting of collective spiritual DNA. The code of hatred, fear, and division has been impressed for centuries, and its harvest has been centuries of suffering. But he knew that a new code could be written, one of love, harmony, and abundance, and that it begins with individuals faithfully whispering truth each night. Each seed planted in the personal subconscious sends ripples into the race mind, and when enough seeds are sown, the harvest becomes inevitable. This is why he urged his listeners to persist, even when their personal results seemed small, for their whispers were not wasted. They were drops in an ocean that, when multiplied, would change the tides of history. And so, at the close of this teaching, the invitation is not only to heal your own body or to prosper your own life, but to see yourself as a participant in the grand restoration of humanity. Whisper not only I am whole, but also humanity is whole. Love governs the world. Divine wisdom guides all people. Peace reigns on earth. These words, whispered in faith, are impressions impressed not only on your own subconscious, but on the collective subconscious, and they must bear fruit in due time. You become both healer and prophet, both patient and physician, both individual and world builder. Thus, the chapter widens to a universal horizon. As you whisper tonight, remember that you are not alone in your bed. You are part of a chorus of awakening souls, whispering truth into the silence, rewriting not only your own DNA, but the spiritual genetics of the race. And when that chorus grows strong enough, when the night is filled with the murmur of faith instead of fear, then indeed the prophecy will come to pass. The old world will dissolve, the new world will emerge, and the subconscious of humanity will reveal at last the radiant blueprint of God. And now, as the journey reaches its radiant summit, Joseph Murphy would gather all these truths into one final vision. The recognition that what you whisper in secret becomes the architecture of your destiny, that every syllable uttered in the silence of your heart is a seed falling into the soil of the subconscious, and that no seed is ever lost. He would say, guard your words, for they are creative. Guard your thoughts, for they are builders. Guard your feelings, for they are the fire that forges reality. And with this reminder, he pressed his students into the deepest awareness that they are not bystanders in the universe, not victims of heredity, not pawns of fate, but luminous co-creators endowed with the divine prerogative to rewrite their lives and, by extension, to participate in rewriting the life of the world. For the subconscious is the servant, the soil, the builder, the physician, and it never rests. It is always working, always producing, always bringing forth what it has been impressed with. The only question is whether it will continue to reproduce the weeds of fear or the flowers of faith, the poisons of resentment or the elixirs of love. This final practice, then, becomes not a matter of occasional devotion, but a way of life. The nightly whisper is not only a technique for healing, but the rhythm of existence itself, the pulse of a soul that has learned to live in harmony with divine law. Every evening is a chance to wipe the slate of the day clean, to forgive what needs forgiving, to affirm what needs affirming, to envision what must be envisioned. And every morning becomes the harvest of what was sown in the secret chamber of sleep. Thus life itself becomes a cycle of sowing and reaping, of whispering and waking, of planting and harvesting. The seeker no longer drifts in chaos, but lives deliberately, consciously, reverently, aware that the invisible is always becoming visible, and that what is whispered in the quiet inevitably echoes in the open. Murphy would point out that even the simplest affirmation, when spoken with faith, is a spark of divine fire. A man who nightly whispers, "I am guided," may find doors opening he never imagined. A woman who repeats, "I am loved," may awaken to relationships suffused with warmth and healing. A child who is taught to say, "I am safe, I am strong," may grow in resilience and courage that confounds heredity. These are not coincidences, but correspondences, the exact outworking of the law that the subconscious must express what it is impressed with. And the great secret is that the power is already yours. You have always been whispering to your subconscious, whether in faith or fear. The invitation is to whisper consciously, deliberately, lovingly, until every word you speak is aligned with the divine order. At this closing moment, then, let us gather the practices into a single breath. Tonight, as you rest, relax the body and quiet the mind. Whisper gently, I am whole now. Every cell of me vibrates with divine life. I forgive and release all. I am guided into my perfect future. I give thanks that it is so. See the images of health, abundance, and joy as though they were already real. Feel the gratitude as though it were already received. Rest in the assurance that infinite intelligence is at work, that the subconscious has accepted the decree, and that the law is unfailing. Fall asleep not in fear but in faith, not in anxiety but in peace, not in doubt but in gratitude. So this is the final seal. Surrender to the law, trust the process, and know that what is impressed tonight is already being expressed in the silent workshop of the subconscious. And tomorrow, when you awaken, walk in expectancy. Do not look anxiously for signs, but move confidently as one who knows that the seed is growing. Speak kindly, act generously, think nobly, for every outer action reinforces the inner pattern. Live as though the healing were already complete, the prosperity already flowing, the joy already accomplished, because in truth it is in the invisible, in the subconscious, in the divine code that has already been reasserted. The visible will follow inevitably, irresistibly, in perfect order. Thus the circle is closed. What you whisper before sleep rewrites your DNA, reshapes your future, reawakens the divine blueprint, and reasserts the eternal truth of who you are. And as more souls join in this practice, whispering faith into the silence, humanity itself will awaken to its inheritance. For the final word of Joseph Murphy's teaching is not limitation but liberation, not fate but freedom, not despair but divine destiny. And so the whisper becomes the roar, the private practice becomes the public transformation, and the individual affirmation becomes the hymn of a new humanity. Behold, I am whole, I am free, I am the child of God now. In the luminous afterglow of all these truths, Joseph Murphy would impress upon the earnest seeker that the journey is never meant to end with a single declaration or a temporary burst of inspiration. Rather, it is the steady rhythm of daily practice that cements the law into lived experience. One whisper is like a spark in the dark. Repeated whispers become a flame. Persistent whispers become a fire that can never be extinguished. He knew well that the subconscious accepts repetition as authority, and so he urged his listeners to take these teachings not as lofty theories, but as practical tools to be wielded with consistency. Night after night, affirmation after affirmation, visualization after visualization, gratitude after gratitude. These are the bricks with which a new destiny is built, each laid gently and faithfully, until the structure of life reflects the architecture of spirit. The subconscious never tires, never ceases, never argues. It only awaits instruction, and its obedience is as certain as sunrise. He often reminded his audience that the great error of many seekers is impatience, the restless demand for instant results, the anxious tearing up of the seed to see if it has sprouted. Yet Murphy taught that the law is infallible. What is impressed must be expressed, but the timing of expression belongs to the subconscious and the infinite wisdom that governs it. Just as a farmer sows and trusts the season, watering patiently and waiting for harvest, so must the spiritual farmer sow affirmations and images into the subconscious, and then rest in faith, knowing that growth is occurring invisibly. To demand instant manifestation is to uproot the process with doubt. To rest in assurance is to allow it to unfold perfectly. This is why he urged seekers to end their nightly ritual, not with tension, but with surrender, not with frantic longing, but with quiet trust. I give thanks that it is done. I release it now to the divine within me. Such surrender removes the last obstacle and allows the subconscious to work unhindered. Murphy also emphasized the importance of weaving these truths into the daytime hours. While the night is the golden gate, the day is the field in which the seeds are tested. If one whispers faith at night but spends the day rehearsing fear, the soil is muddied, the harvest delayed. But if one aligns daytime thought with nighttime affirmation, then the entire life becomes a continuous suggestion to the subconscious, harmonized and powerful. He advised students to carry short affirmations into the day, repeating them inwardly whenever fear or doubt appeared. I am whole now. Divine order governs my life. I prosper in all my ways. These brief repetitions reinforce the nightly practice, reminding the subconscious of its task and preventing the weeds of worry from taking root. And finally, he would close with a reminder that gratitude is the crowning jewel of all practice. Gratitude is faith in action, the soul's way of declaring that the blessing is already real, that the prayer's already answered, that the seed is already sprouting. To give thanks before evidence appears is to impress upon the subconscious the conviction that the thing is done, and once impressed, expression is inevitable. Gratitude transforms, whispering from mechanical repetition into living communion, from dry habit into joyful ceremony. Each night, after affirmations and imagery and forgiveness, he urged his students to whisper simply, "Thank you, Infinite Spirit, for the healing, for the supply, for the joy that fills my life now." And in that thankfulness, the subconscious rests in certainty and the soul sleeps in peace. So the teaching ends not as a conclusion, but as a beginning, a perpetual invitation to practice, to whisper, to believe, to live. For the power to rewrite the future lies not in distant stars, nor in ancestral chains, but in the quiet syllables spoken before sleep, the images painted upon the inner screen, the feelings of gratitude embraced in the heart. Whoever practices faithfully will prove the law for themselves, and in proving it they will stand as a living testimony that destiny is not inherited but created, not fixed but fluid, not chained but free. And thus, night after night, whisper by whisper, faith becomes flesh, thought becomes destiny, and the seeker awakens to the sublime reality that they are indeed the author of their future and the custodian of the divine code written within. At the ultimate horizon of Murphy's vision stands the recognition that the power of the subconscious, once mastered and aligned with divine order, extends beyond personal transformation into the realm of universal uplift. He would remind his students that no whisper of truth is ever wasted, that each word of faith spoken in the silence of one heart reverberates in the collective consciousness of humanity. Just as a single drop falling into a pond sends ripples across the whole surface, so too does a single affirmation, charged with faith, ripple outward into the race mind, influencing unseen currents and adding its vibration to the chorus of creation. To whisper, "I am whole," is to bless not only your own body, but to contribute to the reassertion of wholeness in the human family. To declare, "I forgive," is to release not only your own subconscious from bondage, but to lighten the psychic atmosphere of the world itself. Thus, the nightly practice is both intimate and cosmic, personal and universal, a private ritual that carries planetary consequence. He insisted that this is the hidden responsibility of the awakened soul. Once you know that the subconscious accepts impressions and expresses them, you can no longer dismiss your whispers as trivial or your thoughts as inconsequential. Every impression is creative, every thought is a seed, every feeling is a decree. And when multiplied by millions, these decrees shape the direction of history. Wars, depressions, epidemics, all are but the outer harvest of seeds sown in the collective subconscious through fear, hatred, and despair. Likewise, peace, prosperity, renewal, and harmony will be the inevitable harvest when enough individuals begin sowing seeds of love, abundance, and faith. Murphy envisioned nothing less than a spiritual renaissance, birthed not in cathedrals or parliaments, but in the quiet bedrooms of men and women whispering truth before sleep. Picture this vision. Millions lying down across the globe, not muttering anxieties or replaying resentments, but whispering in unison words of life. A mother in one city says softly, "My children are blessed. Love surrounds them." A businessman in another whispers, "Divine supply flows to me and through me for the blessing of many." A sick man breathes, "Every cell in me responds to the light of God." A student affirms, "I am guided into wisdom and success." Though oceans apart, their whispers converge in the one subconscious of humanity, forming a tide of faith that sweeps away centuries of fear. This is the unseen revolution, the gentle yet irresistible rewriting of the collective code, one whisper at a time. Murphy would close with a promise rooted in eternal law, that no one who practices this faithfully can remain unchanged, and no society filled with such practitioners can remain untransformed. For the subconscious is not selective, it is law. It must express what is impressed. And when humanity chooses to impress harmony, wholeness, love, and abundance, the world must by law reflect those conditions. This is the new earth spoken of by prophets, not delivered from outside, but birthed from within, not imposed by decree, but manifested through faith. The whisper before sleep becomes the seed of tomorrow's civilization, the architecture of a destiny, not of bondage, but of freedom, not of decay, but of renewal. So the final invitation is this: do not underestimate the power of your nightly whisper. Speak it as though the world itself depends on it, for in truth it does. Whisper as though your words are the leaven that will raise the whole loaf of humanity, for indeed they are. Whisper not only for your own healing, but for the healing of nations, not only for your own prosperity, but for the circulation of wealth across the globe, not only for your own peace, but for the peace of the earth. And as you do, know that you are participating in the greatest work of all, the rewriting of humanity's spiritual DNA, the restoration of the divine blueprint for the race, the unfolding of a future radiant with the light of God.